I woke up early and slipped out of bed before Qin Rushua woke up. I headed straight to the kitchen to have the servants make her a special nourishing soup. After what happened last night, she'd need it. When I got to the training grounds, my new wife was already there in her red outfit, looking cold and angry, probably because I'd left without a word. 100 guards stood in formation, 50 veteran soldiers I'd picked before, standing sharp and disciplined, and 50 new guys who looked sloppy and full of attitude. I stepped up and introduced myself as the new master of Dingbei Manor. Then I dropped the good news. Everyone's pay would double, and they'd get meat with every meal. That got them cheering fast. Next, I announced that Qin Rushua would be the chief instructor, in charge of all defense and training. Her word would be the same as mine, and anyone who disobeyed would answer to her. That shut the crowd up quick. Then, because I couldn't help myself, I walked over to her in front of everyone and opened the food box I'd brought. I told her she'd worked hard last night and needed to drink the soup to keep her strength up, especially for tonight's training. Her face turned red as a tomato. She looked like she wanted to stab me. But I also noticed a little softness in her eyes when she realized I'd gotten up early just to make her soup. That was enough for me. Of course, trouble came fast. A big brute named Zhang Kuei stepped forward and started running his mouth. He said the men didn't feel comfortable taking orders from a woman, especially a pretty one. His buddies laughed and made dirty jokes about how she got the position. I just grabbed a chair, sat down, and sipped my tea. This was Qin Rushua's fight. If she wanted these thugs to respect her, she had to earn it herself. I couldn't do it for her. She challenged Zhang Kuei on the spot. He said if she could last 10 moves against him, he'd obey her without question. I clapped and agreed, then told him if he lost, his whole month's pay was gone. He laughed and said he couldn't possibly lose, so I told them to begin. Qin Rushua tossed her sword to a maid and told Zhang Kuei she didn't even need a weapon to deal with him. She beckoned him forward with her bare hands. He charged at her with a massive punch aimed at her face, but she just tilted slightly and dodged it like it was nothing. Then she went to work on him, a chop to the wrist that made his whole arm go numb, followed by elbows, knees, and kicks, all hitting his weakest spots. The guys watching could only see a red blur dancing around this bear of a man. He couldn't even touch the hem of her clothes. She finished him with a clean shoulder throw, slamming his 200+ pounds into the stone ground. Then she put her foot on his chest and asked if he submitted. He did. Everyone else went dead silent. Nobody dared challenge her after that. With that settled, she got straight to work as chief instructor. Instead of boring strength drills, she split everyone into 10 squads of 10 and started teaching them a formation called the 10 Directions Annihilation Array. The veterans had heard of large-scale battle formations, but a 10-man version was completely new to them. She explained it clearly, demonstrated the moves herself, and showed real military expertise. These tough soldiers went from mocking her to genuinely respecting her as a commander. I sat in my chair drinking tea, watching her shine. She looked more beautiful out here than anywhere else, confident, passionate, finally able to use her talents. Then I opened my system panel. Her stats looked great. Beauty score 97, intimacy 98. But there was a locked talent called Unyielding that would give me a toughness ability to resist physical damage. The catch? I had to get her to dance for me. With her temper, asking that would probably get me sliced in half. I briefly considered sneaking a dance costume onto her while she slept and posing her arms, but immediately killed that idea. If she woke up mid-pose, it wouldn't be a domestic dispute, it'd be a crime scene. Then I noticed a reward package from last night still sitting in my system. I opened it and got a book, the complete version of the 10 Directions Annihilation Array. The exact same formation she was teaching right now, except she only had an incomplete family version. This complete edition could make a 10-man squad multiply their fighting power and take on enemies several times their number. That's when it clicked. For a military family daughter who lives and breathes combat, the most irresistible thing in the world isn't gold or jewelry. It's a lost, legendary battle technique from her own clan. A perfect plan started forming in my head. That dance costume, she's definitely wearing it. When I pushed open Qin Rushua's door that night, the room was dim with just one candle burning. She was sitting on the edge of the bed in a light blue silk nightgown, pretending to read a military book, except she was holding it upside down. Her eyes had been glued to the door since I walked in, but she was trying hard not to look eager. The room smelled like flowers from her bath. She'd clearly been waiting for me. I teased her, asking if she was waiting up for me. She snapped back that she wasn't, but her red ears and fast breathing gave her away. Then I started my act. I put on a troubled face and sighed heavily, telling her I came because I just couldn't hold it in anymore, that I was suffering and needed her help. Her face went completely red. She was clearly thinking exactly what I wanted her to think. She lowered her head, voice barely a whisper, and agreed, but insisted it was only for cultivation, only to get stronger, definitely not because she actually wanted to. Then she started fumbling with her clothes, her nervous fingers struggling with the sash. That's when I dropped the act. "What are you doing? Why are you taking off your clothes?" She froze. Total blank stare. I slapped my forehead and pulled out the ancient book from inside my robe, telling her I'd found this incredible formation manual but couldn't understand it. That's why I came so late. I needed her military expertise to explain it to me. She turned to stone. She looked at the book, then at her half-undone sash, and I could practically see her soul leaving her body. She'd completely misread the situation and had started undressing on her own. She tied her clothes back up at lightning speed, face red enough to bleed, and started screaming at me to get out so she could sleep. I could tell she was furious. She'd bathed, put on new clothes, waited 2 whole hours, and I showed up with a book. She was cursing me in her head. I was sure of it. She shoved me toward the door. But right as I was stepping over the threshold, I let out one last sigh and said casually, "Well, I guess I'll take this complete version of the 10 Directions Annihilation Array and find someone else to help me with it." I made sure to say those key words nice and clear. She was too angry to hear it at first and kept waving me off. I smiled like a fox and took 1 step, then 2 toward the door. Then it hit her. Wait. Her scream nearly shook the walls. She was staring at my back with huge, shocked eyes. "What did you just say?" The complete version?" 1 second she was ready to throw me out. The next she was a red blur flying to the door, grabbing my arm with both hands, demanding I repeat what I'd said. I played dumb. "What did I say?" She was practically bouncing, desperate. "The complete version. You said complete version." I slowly pulled the book back out and dangled it in front of her. Before I could even finish my sentence, it was already gone from my hand, snatched away so fast I barely saw her move. She held it like it was a long-lost child. She opened the first page, and her eyes went wide. It was the same formation her family had passed down, but with detailed notes explaining everything she'd never been able to figure out. Years of confusion cleared up in seconds. She started mumbling to herself about flanking positions and formation structures, completely forgetting I existed. I leaned against the doorframe and smiled. The fish had swallowed the hook. When she finally snapped out of it and asked where I got it, I scratched my head and told her I bought it from a used book stall at the market for 3 copper coins. She looked like someone had punched her in the chest, her family's treasured, incomplete legacy, worth 3 coins. She opened up to me then, explaining how the real formation could let 10 men fight like an army, but her family only had a broken version that lost most of its power generations ago. It was her deepest regret. I acted surprised, then steered the conversation exactly where I wanted it. I told her the first half of the book was brilliant formation stuff, but the second half was strange. It was all drawings of a woman dancing in skimpy clothes, with a note saying this dance, called Dance of Form and Intent, held the key to truly mastering the formation. She frowned and flipped to the back half. Sure enough, beautiful illustrations of a woman in revealing outfits doing all kinds of movements. To her trained eye, every pose secretly contained fighting techniques and footwork, but they were also extremely seductive. Then she read the final passage. The dancer must wear special, ritual garments, thin as cicada wings, skin tight, to feel the flow of energy and connect with the formation's soul. Her brain was at war. Half of her screamed this was ridiculous. The other half whispered that throughout history, great martial artists had found breakthroughs through dance and music. Maybe the point was to shed a warrior's rigidity and find softness to understand true killing power. I could see she was tearing herself apart, so I moved in for the kill. I sighed heavily and said it was obviously fake, probably written by some dirty old man. Then I reached for the book, saying I'd use it to start a cooking fire. She clutched it to her chest like I'd threatened to kill her firstborn. "You can't." That was it. The family legacy, the chance to restore her clan's honor. It crushed every bit of resistance she had. After a long, painful silence, she bit her lip so hard it nearly bled. Then, in a voice so quiet I could barely hear it, she squeezed out the words, "This dance. I can try it." She paused, catching her breath, then added one more thing. "But I don't have the ritual clothes." When she said she didn't have the ritual clothes, I grinned inside. That was exactly what I'd been waiting to hear. I flipped my wrist and pulled out a fire-red outfit I'd already prepared. I told her the old bookseller threw it in with the manual. She took one look and her eyes nearly popped out of her head. It wasn't really clothing. It was a few pieces of see-through red silk, thin as insect wings, held together by thin gold chains at the neck, back, and waist. The skirt barely covered anything. Golden phoenix patterns were stitched across it. It was gorgeous and absolutely scandalous. She screamed at me that it was a Western dancer's costume, accused me of planning this all along, and started shoving me toward the door. I put on my most innocent face and pointed to the book's instructions. It clearly said the ritual garment must be thin as cicada wings and fit like a second skin. This outfit matched perfectly. She kept pushing me out, but I planted my feet and didn't budge. I snatched the book back and argued my case. I gave her the book and the clothes for free, so how was it fair for her to kick me out and study alone? I said I wanted to understand the formation's secrets too. She accused me of having other motives. I acted deeply offended and said that studying formations and dance between husband and wife was completely normal, and she was the one with the dirty mind. She couldn't argue back. The book did say what it said, and I was her husband. She tried one last escape. She'd learn it alone and teach me later. I shook my head hard. Secondhand knowledge was never as good as seeing it yourself. Besides, who would check if her poses were correct? What if she practiced wrong and hurt herself? I needed to be there for her safety. She was wavering, so I went for the finishing blow. I sighed sadly, said I was asking too much, and turned to leave, taking the book and clothes with me. Wait. She snatched everything from my hands in a flash and clutched it all to her chest like a cat guarding its food. I kept my innocent face. "What is it?" After a long, painful struggle, face red as a tomato, she squeezed out the words, I'll change." She disappeared behind the room divider. I poured myself tea and waited, listening to the rustling of fabric and her cursing my name under her breath. When she finally stepped out, I nearly spat out my tea. She was stunning. If the normal Qin Ruxue was a sword hidden in its sheath, this version was a blood-red rose blooming at midnight. The red silk clung to every curve of her athletic body, the flat stomach, the long legs, all on full display. Her hair was tied back with a simple red ribbon, and her face was flushed from her cheeks all the way down to her collarbones. Her eyes were darting around, full of shame and anger, but still holding that stubborn fire of a general's daughter. That mix of innocence and allure, embarrassment and defiance. It was more captivating than any deliberate seduction could ever be. Have you stared enough?" She snapped, her voice shaking. I cleared my throat, picked up the book, and put on my most serious face. Time to study formations. I started coaching her through the dance poses from the illustrations. She was stiff and awkward at first. Asking a warrior woman to do seductive hip movements was harder for her than actual combat. But I kept giving directions. Twist your waist more, lift your leg higher, soften your eyes. She cursed me in her head the whole time, I'm sure. But then something strange happened. As the dance went on, she started to lose herself in it. Her movements went from clumsy to smooth, flowing like water. She shifted between snake-like flexibility, crane-like elegance, and explosive bursts of power. Sweat ran down her face and body, glowing in the candlelight. She was mesmerizing. When the dance ended, my system chimed. The unyielding, talent activated, and I got the tenacity, body trait, major resistance to physical damage from blades, blunt weapons, and fists. A warm energy rushed through me. Mission accomplished. She collapsed on the floor, exhausted and drenched in sweat, the red outfit clinging to her. She said her body felt amazing, but she hadn't grasped any formation secrets. Looking at her like that, I couldn't hold back anymore. I scooped her up, carried her to the bed, and, well, the candles flickered and the rest of the night took care of itself. The next morning, I slipped out early again. But this time I left warm rice porridge and a note on the bedside table praising her dance and telling her to rest up. I signed off with, "We have plenty of time ahead," underlined heavily, of course. She probably called me a pervert when she read it. Later that morning, she went back to studying the formation book in the daylight. The first half was still incredible, real ancient knowledge that answered all her questions. But when she reached the dance section, things started to unravel. The paper was too new. Someone had soaked the edges in tea to fake an aged look, but the texture was completely different from the real pages. She sniffed the ink, fresh, no more than 3 days old. Then she checked the binding. The stitching was sloppy, with a loose thread where someone had clearly taken the book apart and sewn it back together badly. Every piece clicked into place. The 3-coin bookstall story. The old man who conveniently sold the outfit too. The mystical dance of form and intent that was supposedly the key to mastering the formation. All fake. Every bit of it. I'd drawn those dance pages myself, cracked open the book, stuffed them in, and stitched it shut. And she'd fallen for it completely. She'd actually put on that ridiculous outfit and danced for me. I heard the teacup shatter from across the manor. Then came the scream. My name, ripping through the air like a blade, followed by a death threat that echoed over every rooftop in Dingbei Manor. Lin Mo, I'm going to kill you. I probably should have done a better job with the book binding. When I heard that scream tearing across the manor, I knew I was a dead man if she caught me. The sheer killing intent in her voice left zero doubt. Qin Rushue had figured out my little trick with the fake dance pages. I bolted through the hallways like a scared rabbit, cursing my own stupidity. I should have used better paper, better ink, better stitching, or at least added a note at the end saying, "Just a joke between husband and wife, please don't murder me." Behind me, I could hear the chaos spreading. Servants screaming, doors getting kicked open, her sword humming with bloodlust. She was literally shredding fallen leaves with her sword energy as she stormed through the courtyards. She hit my room first, empty. Then she went to First Sister Su Qingyue's place. At least she had the sense to calm down before going in there, since Big Sis was pregnant. Su Qingyue hadn't seen me. Then Rushue interrogated the gatekeepers. No, the master hadn't left the compound. She ordered a room-by-room search of the entire manor. I needed a hiding spot, fast. Su Qingyue's place was too obvious. The other sisters-in-law might sell me out. Then it hit me, third sister-in-law, Lu Yi. I sprinted to her courtyard, listening Willow's pavilion. The place was nothing like a typical woman's quarters. Instead of flowers and makeup, there were bamboo, a koi pond, a wall-sized bookshelf, a huge map of the empire, and a jade abacus. It looked like a war room for a business empire. Lu Yi herself was sitting at her desk reviewing account books, wearing a simple green dress. She was beautiful in a completely different way from my other wives, a natural, effortless allure that could steal a man's soul with just a glance. I crashed through her door screaming for help. She looked amused and asked what I'd done. Dug up Rushue's family graves? I told her it was worse. I tricked her into dancing. Her eyes lit up with pure gossip excitement. Then we heard Rushue's voice outside. Lu Yi pointed at her wardrobe and I dove in, burying myself among her clothes. She smoothed her dress, put on a calm face, and opened the door. Rushue stood there gripping her sword, scanning the room over Lu Yi's shoulder. The room smelled like ink and sandalwood. No trace of me. Have you seen Lin Mo? She asked coldly. Lu Yi blinked innocently. No, I've been here doing accounts all morning. Why? What happened? Qin Rushue stared hard into Lu Yi's eyes, trying to find any hint of a lie. But Third Sister's expression was flawless, calm, clear, just the right amount of concern. She even offered to let Rushue search the room. That actually made Rushue less suspicious. She figured someone as quiet and uninvolved as Third Sister would never cover for me. Rushue left with one last threat. If she caught me, she'd hang me on the training ground flagpole and dry me out for 3 days. When her footsteps faded, I let out the longest breath of my life. Lu Yi knocked on the wardrobe door and told me it was safe. I stumbled out, stiff from crouching, and felt something light and soft caught on my head. I grabbed it without thinking. It was a light purple undergarment made of ice silk, almost see-through, with 2 little butterflies embroidered in silver thread. It still carried her scent, that faint orchid fragrance. We both froze. Her face went bright red. She snatched it from my hands, stuffed it back in the wardrobe, and slammed the door shut. After a moment, she composed herself and asked what kind of dance could make her fearless second sister want to commit murder. I turned red too. No way I was explaining that I'd tricked her sister into wearing a skimpy dancer outfit and performing for me. I mumbled that it was a long story. She leaned in closer, eyes twinkling, and asked if it was longer than the story of what just came out of her wardrobe. I nearly choked on my own blood. This woman's teasing was lethal. She laughed, the kind of laugh that made the whole room feel warmer, and let it go. I could tell she was already planning to get the full story out of Rushua later. She went back to her desk and her account books like nothing happened. Since she wasn't kicking me out, I decided to stay put. Rushua had already searched this place, so it was the safest spot in the whole manor. Hide in plain sight. With nothing else to do, I started wandering around her room, pretending to get familiar with the place while stealing glances at her. She was impossibly beautiful even just sitting there working. Every tiny movement, a turn of her wrist, a slight frown, radiated natural charm without trying. I finally understood why she always covered herself head to toe when going outside. A face and presence like hers, walking around uncovered, would cause absolute chaos. Then I actually looked at what she was working on, and my jaw dropped. This wasn't simple bookkeeping. Spread across her desk was a detailed map of Black Wind City with every shop, warehouse, trade route, and potential mine marked in colored ink. Her notes contained sharp business analysis covering everything from supply chains to dealing with corrupt officials and underworld connections. This wasn't a sheltered wife doing household accounts. This was a business empire mastermind. If she'd been born in my old world, she wouldn't just be a CFO, she'd be running the whole show. Louie noticed me looking through her plans and seemed a bit embarrassed. She called it all just daydreaming on paper, great ideas that hit walls everywhere in reality. I asked for an example. She pulled out a sheet about salt. There were massive salt flats outside Black Wind City, but all the salt trade was controlled by a monopoly. What the city needed was refined salt to break that grip. She'd asked every old salt worker she could find, and they all said purifying crude salt was nearly impossible. I almost laughed out loud. Purifying crude salt? That was literally middle school chemistry. Dissolve, filter, evaporate, crystallize. I'd memorized those steps for my exams back in my old life. I could recite, stick, lower, lean in my sleep. And this world didn't have it? Keeping my face totally calm, I grabbed her brush, dipped it in ink, and drew a beaker, a funnel, and a burner on a blank sheet. Then I looked at her with my most smug expression and asked if salt purification was really that hard. She studied my drawing, turning it this way and that, frowning harder by the second. Then she asked if it was some kind of magic talisman or battle formation diagram. She tossed it aside and told me to go play somewhere else and stop bothering her, like I was a toddler showing off a mud pie. I nearly had a heart attack from the insult. I picked up my masterpiece and started pointing frantically. This is a beaker. This is a funnel. This is fire for heating. She tilted her head and asked, "A baked cake?" I froze for 3 full seconds before slapping my forehead. This was ancient times. There were no beakers. The word chemistry didn't exist. I was speaking gibberish to her. I took a deep breath and simplified everything. What if I could turn that hard, yellow, gritty crude salt into salt as white as snow and fine as sand? Would her plan work then? Her eyes instantly lit up. Absolutely. With a steady supply of fine salt, her plan had a real chance. But then a problem hit me. In this empire, salt and iron were government-controlled. You needed an official salt license to sell on any real scale, and those licenses were guarded by layers of powerful people. She went quiet for a moment, then walked into her inner room. When she came back, she was holding a small wooden box. Inside was a beautiful white jade pendant carved in the shape of a boat. Then she told me something I'd never known. She said she'd agreed to marry into the Lin family for 2 reasons: respect for a family of war heroes and a deal with her father. He'd promised her one wish if she went through with the marriage. She'd planned to use that wish to open her own trading company in the capital. But then our family was ruined and exiled, and her dream shattered with it. She held up the jade pendant and said it was her family's token. With it, she believed she could get us a salt license. I looked at that pendant and kept my thoughts to myself. Her business instincts were terrifying, but when it came to family, she had a blind spot. The Liu family were wealthy merchants in the capital. When the Lin family was powerful, the marriage was good business. After we were exiled, they didn't even send a letter. They'd already cut us loose completely. The idea that they'd now risk angering the emperor over a jade token and an old promise? I wasn't so sure about that. When I looked at the jade pendant, I had my doubts about whether her family would honor their promise. But then I saw the fire in Liu Yi's eyes, that burning ambition and dream, and I couldn't bring myself to crush it. Maybe her father would surprise us. Either way, I wasn't going to be the one to snuff out that flame. She leaned closer, her orchid scent practically seeping into my bones, and asked if I could really turn crude salt into fine salt. I figured even if the salt license was a long shot, this was a good chance to build our relationship. So I grinned and told her I'd show her a magic trick. I had her send for supplies: crude salt, water, cotton cloth, fine sand, charcoal. All common stuff. She looked puzzled, wondering how any of this could produce the legendary Snow White salt. We moved everything into the kitchen, and I picked up some crude salt to examine it. Rough, gritty, full of black sand and ash. I licked it, bitter, harsh, with an earthy taste. But in my head, my old chemistry teacher's voice came back crystal clear, walking through each step. Dissolve, filter, evaporate. Every detail from that middle school experiment was still perfectly preserved in my memory. Before I could start, Liu Yi quietly dismissed all the servants and told them nobody could enter the courtyard or come near the kitchen. Then she closed the door and bolted it. My heart skipped a beat. The locked door, just the two of us. But she simply turned around and said I could begin my trick. Right. I was getting ahead of myself. Still, I couldn't help thinking, beautiful, brilliant, trusting. This woman was the perfect ally. I absolutely had to win her over. Your drool is showing, she teased, catching me staring. I wiped my mouth and quickly got to business. I asked her to help me lift the big iron pot onto the stove. We each grabbed one side and heaved it up. She dusted off her hands afterward and accidentally smeared soot on her face without noticing. 2 cute black streaks on her cheeks. She just looked at me with those bright eyes and asked, "What's next?" "Water," I ordered, feeling like a general commanding troops. She grabbed a heavy wooden bucket, must have been 50 pounds, and started lifting. I rushed over to take it from her, and my hand landed right on top of hers on the handle. Her skin was cool and impossibly smooth. She froze for a second, glanced at me, but I played it cool and poured the water in like nothing happened. She leaned close to my ear and whispered, "Was my hand smooth?" I nearly choked. This woman's teasing was going to kill me. For a split second I considered just grabbing her right there. But no. Work first. Red-faced, I barked out the next step: light the fire. She ran to the stove, stuffed in some kindling, and got it going. I told her to keep it at medium heat, just barely bubbling, not a full boil. She asked why. I made up some excuse about saving time instead of explaining saturated solution temperature control. When the water was ready, I grabbed a handful of crude salt to toss in, but she stopped me, handed me a wooden spoon, and said salt would hurt my hands. It was such a small, natural gesture, like we'd been working side by side for years. It warmed my heart. I scooped salt in while she stirred. The grains hissed and dissolved in the warm water. The kitchen filled with the sounds of wooden spoons swirling, fire crackling, and sunlight streaming through the window, stretching our shadows across the floor, blending together into one picture. While I added salt to the warm water, I explained each step to Liu Yi. She was a fast learner. She figured out, saturated, without me even using the word. The moment she spotted undissolved grains floating on top, she asked if it was ready. Smart woman. I had her kill the fire and let it sit. The water looked like murky yellow soup and smelled terrible. She asked if we'd failed. I told her to relax. This was just step 1, separating the good stuff from the bad. Then I mixed some wood ash with warm water, let it settle, and strained off the clear liquid on top. She asked what it was for. I told her it would eat the bitterness out of the salt. Her eyes went wide. I was blowing her mind with basic chemistry she'd never seen before. I poured the ash water into the salt solution and stirred. Cloudy stuff started clumping together and sinking to the bottom. Now came the key part: filtering. I had her lay cotton cloth over a frame with a basin underneath. Without me saying anything, she grabbed stones to weigh down the edges and create a dip in the center. Clever. I layered clean sand and crushed charcoal on top, making the crudest filter in history. Then I carefully ladled the top layer of salt water over the charcoal, avoiding the sediment at the bottom. We watched in silence as clear drops slowly formed and fell into the basin below. It took over an hour to get half a basin of crystal clear brine. Last step, evaporation. We poured the filtered water back into a clean pot on the lowest possible heat. She kept the fire down to just 3 thin sticks of kindling while I stirred gently with a wooden spatula. The kitchen got hot. We were standing close, both sweating, both staring at the pot like 2 kids sneaking candy. My system chimed. Her intimacy went up by 3 points. Then she gasped. White crystals were forming on the surface and bottom of the pot, tiny and sparkling. It worked. I slowed my stirring, careful not to break the delicate crystals. The water evaporated until only a thin layer of snow-white powder remained. The edges were slightly yellow from imperfect heat control, but the center was flawless, pure white salt. She crouched beside the pot, reaching out but afraid to touch, like it was a priceless treasure. I couldn't resist. I dipped my finger in the salt and held it up to her lips with a grin. Taste it, third sister. I expected her to blush, slap my hand away, call me shameless. I had my follow-up jokes ready. Instead, she just opened her mouth and took my finger in. My brain shut down. Her tongue gently swept the salt off my fingertip, warm and soft. Every script I'd prepared went out the window. The hunter had just become the prey, but her mind was somewhere else entirely. The instant the salt dissolved on her tongue, her eyes blazed with light. No bitterness, no grit, no earthy aftertaste. Just pure, clean, perfect salt. I could practically see the gears spinning in her head. The final piece of her grand business plan had just clicked into place. Trade routes, licenses, profits, monopoly breaking. It all connected into one golden road. She looked up at me with eyes full of genuine amazement and something warmer underneath. Her intimacy jumped another 5 points. The kitchen was steaming, the air between us charged. Everything was heading in a very promising direction. Bang! The kitchen door exploded off its hinges. A red blur burst through, radiating murderous intent. I knew you were hiding here. You rotten bastard. Qin Rushua had found me. Qin Rushua had spent the whole day tearing the manor apart looking for me. She'd checked every room, every corner, even the dog holes, 3 times. She was about to launch a full search party when she passed by Lu Yi's courtyard again. This time she noticed something off. The gates were suspiciously shut, and smoke was rising from the kitchen even though it wasn't dinner time. She vaulted over the wall without hesitation. The courtyard was empty. No servants anywhere. Every room open except the kitchen, which was locked tight. She crept close and heard my voice saying, "Taste it, third sister," in a tone she'd never heard from me before. Her brain exploded. A man and woman alone, locked in a kitchen, and he's asking her to taste something? She kicked the door clean off its hinges. What she saw made it worse. Lu Yi's face was flushed, lips slightly parted like she'd just finished something. And I was standing there like an idiot with my finger raised, still glistening wet. In Rushua's furious imagination, this became an adult novel in about 2 seconds flat. Alone together, locked door, that pose, she didn't need any more evidence. "What are you two doing?" she screamed. I snapped back to reality, hid my hand behind my back, and blurted out the worst possible words. "Let me make something up, and oh, let me explain." She drew her sword. The blade hummed with killing intent, aimed right at me. Then Lu Yi did something that genuinely touched me. She stepped directly between us, shielding me from the sword. She told Rushua to calm down, that she couldn't hurt me because I was key to an important plan for the Lin family. She pointed at the snow-white salt in the pot and tried to explain what we'd just accomplished and what it meant for our future. But Rushua's head was too full of rage to hear any of it. She shoved past Lu Yi, grabbed my ear, and started dragging me out. "Ow, ow, it's going to come off." She didn't care. She hauled me through the courtyard by my ear, cursing the whole way about me hiding and fooling around with third sister in the kitchen. I screamed for Lu Yi to save me. Then I made another mistake. I started to say, "I'll never make you wear that outfit again." "Shut up. Shut your mouth." Lu Yi watched us from the kitchen doorway, shaking her head with a small smile. She knew Rushua wouldn't actually kill me. After we were gone, she carefully collected every grain of the white salt into a porcelain jar and had her maids clean the kitchen spotless, removing all evidence of our experiment. Then she noticed a crumpled paper on the floor, my terrible drawing from earlier, the one she'd called a baked cake. She picked it up. Before, she'd thought it was a joke. But now, having watched that drawing come to life as real science, she looked at it completely differently. She folded it carefully and tucked it against her chest. The scene I made getting dragged through the manor by my ear was spectacular. Every servant, maid, and guard in the place watched with their jaws on the floor as Qin Rushua hauled me from Lu Yi's courtyard like a criminal. Within minutes, the rumors were flying at light speed. One version said the two wives were fighting over me. Another said I'd been caught doing unspeakable things with third sister in the kitchen. The wildest version claimed I was some kind of mystical energy source that both women were competing to absorb. My carefully built image as a mysterious expert collapsed overnight, replaced by my new reputation as a daring playboy juggling sisters-in-law. She kicked open her bedroom door, threw me inside, and bolted it shut. Before I could catch my balance, her sword was already at my throat, the blade hovering an inch from my Adam's apple. Any last words before you die? I felt the icy sting of steel and knew that begging or making excuses would only make things worse. So I activated my inner actor. I dropped every trace of joking from my face and looked her straight in the eyes with total sincerity, even mixed in some guilt. Rushua, what I did last night was wrong. I tricked you into wearing that outfit and dancing. My methods were terrible, and I'm sorry. She blinked, clearly not expecting a real apology. Then I pivoted hard. But I don't regret it. Because I saw the most beautiful sight in the world. Getting to see that side of you. I could die right now with no regrets. She went blank. The words were shameless and sincere at the same time. Crude, yet somehow tender. I could see flashes of last night's dance crossing her mind. Her face turning red. She was angry, embarrassed, but somewhere deep down, a tiny bit of sweetness crept in that she couldn't quite fight off. Smooth talker, she snapped. But her wrist dipped, and the sword dropped away from my neck. I exhaled. Crisis over, clang. The blade was back at my throat. Fine, we'll set that aside for now, she hissed, eyes blazing again. But explain what you and third sister were really doing in that kitchen. With the door locked, her voice dripped with an acid she probably didn't even realize was pure jealousy. The moment I heard it, everything clicked. This wasn't really about me hiding. She was jealous. That changed everything. My courage swelled. Instead of backing away from the blade, I stepped forward. While I was busy, making amends, to Qin Rushua, Lu Yi was working through the night in her study. She'd changed into a silk robe and was completely ignoring the ridiculous rumors spreading through the manor. She had the porcelain jar of snow-white salt on her desk, but what she treasured more was my crumpled drawing, the one she'd called a baked cake. Now she understood what a beaker and funnel were, and she realized the man who dreamed up that process was worth far more than any amount of salt. She spread out a huge sheet of paper and started writing at frightening speed. Production plans, cost breakdowns, target customers, nobles and commoners both, pricing strategy, distribution channels, risk assessment covering officials, competitors, and criminals. A massive business empire blueprint taking shape under her brush. At the end, she wrote two names on a separate sheet, the Qin family and the Black Tiger Gang. They were the city's biggest salt monopoly and one of the 4 major gangs. They'd be the first enemy to crush. She knew the salt could beat their product, but dealing with violent thugs would require a different kind of strength. She glanced toward Rushua's courtyard, wondering how I was holding up. As for me, I was lying flat on Rushua's bed feeling like I'd completed a pilgrimage to the west, surviving 81 trials along the way. The tigress who'd been screaming murder hours ago was now curled up against me like a kitten, sleeping peacefully with a satisfied little smile on her lips. I opened her system panel. Both scores had hit maximum. Beauty 100, Intimacy 100. The image showed a goddess in black and red armor surrounded by fire phoenixes. Absolutely perfect. Then 2 golden reward packages dropped. I ripped them open immediately. The first gave me a puppet doll, a one-time item I could bind to any woman. Whatever I did to the doll, she'd feel with full sensation for 1 hour. My imagination went wild. Picture Lu Yi calmly reading her accounts while I tickle the doll's foot from across the manor. Or Rushua practicing sword work when suddenly her backside gets a phantom slap. The possibilities were endless and terrible. The second reward was even better. A word becomes law. Talisman. One use. After crushing it, anything I said would create a powerful suggestion in the target's mind, making them believe and follow my words. I was already fantasizing. Next time Rushua pulls a sword on me, I just crush the talisman and casually suggest she put on the dancer outfit for another martial arts discussion. She'd blush and actually do it. I was grinning like an idiot when Rushua let out a soft moan beside me. While I was enjoying my rewards, Rushua shifted in her sleep, wrapped around me like an octopus, and mumbled, "You're not allowed to leave, you jerk." Her eyebrows scrunched up. Even in her dreams, probably dreaming about me sneaking off to the kitchen with Lu Yi again. I kissed her forehead and she relaxed, her face smoothing out peacefully. I pulled up Lu Yi's panel next. Her portrait was still gray, not yet collected. Beauty score, 99 out of 100, labeled, innate allure, almost perfect right from the start. Intimacy was only at 32, described as silent affection. Her talent, activation conditions, and effects were all still locked behind question marks. I thought about how different she was from Rushua. With Rushua, I just needed thick skin and boldness. Charge straight in, break down her walls with sheer force of personality. She was at Tsundere warrior at heart. Lu Yi was a completely different game. Her seductive charm was just the surface. Underneath was a razor-sharp mind. Normal physical advances would bounce right off her. She'd treat them like a child playing pretend. She was like a clever, elegant fox. Try to grab her, and she'd slip right through your fingers. To win her over, I needed strategy. I had to find the key to her heart, not her body. It was like switching from an action game to a strategy game. I fell asleep thinking it over, holding my warm human power bank. The next morning, I woke up and tried to carefully slide my arm out from under Rushua's neck. I needed to find Lu Yi to continue planning the salt business. That determined whether our future involved fine dining or plain bread and pickles. I moved inch by inch, barely breathing. "Where are you going?" Her voice came out of nowhere, ghostly and calm. She'd been awake the whole time, pretending to sleep. A tactical ambush. She pinched the soft part of my arm, so hard I saw stars. "Running away again. Is my bed full of nails? Do I snore? Why are you never here when I wake up?" She was genuinely hurt. She'd woken the instant I started moving, hoping I'd cuddle her or steal a kiss like the romantic heroes in storybooks. Instead, I was trying to escape. Again, I turned on maximum survival instinct, plastering on my most innocent face. I told her I was heading to the kitchen to personally make her a nourishing breakfast after she'd worked so hard last night. She yanked me back onto the bed with one arm. "I'm not hungry." She flipped on top of me, pinning me down, her body backlit by morning sun, not a stitch of clothing. Every line of her athletic figure on full display. Those phoenix eyes burned into mine. "Until I say you can leave, you're not going anywhere." I raised both hands in surrender. "Yes, ma'am, whatever you say, my queen." The frost on her face finally thawed a little. She climbed off, but immediately wrapped herself around me like a koala, burying her face in my neck. "I want to ask you something," she mumbled. Rushua buried her face in my neck and asked the question that had been eating at her all night. Was the formation book real or fake? Just the dance pages or the whole thing? I teased her with guess and got a little punch to the chest for it. So I asked her what she thought, since she'd studied her family's formation for years. She thought it over carefully. The paper, the ink, the ancient feel. Everything except those dance pages was clearly old and genuine. The formation content matched her family's incomplete version perfectly, and the detailed notes solved problems she'd struggled with for years. She said she believed it was real, except for the dance part. I kissed her forehead and confirmed it. Everything was authentic except the pages I'd carefully crafted to help her understand the formation's soul. She could study it with full confidence. It was the real lost complete version of her family's legacy. Her eyes lit up like stars. Then they narrowed again. She poked my chest and demanded to know where I really got it. No more stories about three-coin book stalls and mysterious old men, or she'd make a cutting gesture that left nothing to the imagination. I said guess, again. She screamed my name and started pummeling me with her fists, though they landed soft as cotton. I laughed, pulled her close, and was about to settle the argument in a more physical way when, knock, knock, knock. A maid announced that third Madame Louis was requesting both of us come over to discuss an important matter. My eyes lit up. Louis had already moved on the salt business, exactly the efficiency I'd expected from her. But Rushua went stiff the instant she heard, "Third Madam." Yesterday's kitchen scene replayed in her head at full resolution. She told the maid we hadn't eaten breakfast yet and would come later. Then I caught it. She'd called me husband in front of the servant. That stubborn mule had never done that before. Jealousy really does work wonders. I pressed my lips to her burning red ear and whispered, "What did you just call me?" "Say it again." "I didn't hear." "I didn't call you anything," she shouted, face crimson to her collarbone. I pounced, tickling her until she was laughing and begging for mercy. Then the maid knocked again. Louis had anticipated Rushua's stalling. She'd already prepared breakfast with all our favorite dishes and said the matter concerned the entire future of our manor. She asked us to come immediately. Brilliant move. She'd cut off every excuse and elevated it to a level Rushua couldn't refuse. I looked at my pouting wife, her face practically stamped with, "I'm not happy," and "I'm still jealous." I softened my voice and told her to stop being jealous. She knew Louis's personality. If third sister said it was important, it really was important. "We should go." She turned her head away, lips pushed out far enough to hang a bottle from. "I am not jealous." Rushua practically dragged me to Louis's place, clutching my hand the entire way and stabbing me with death glares. She was drowning in jealousy, like she'd been chugging vinegar by the barrel. But honestly, I kind of liked it. This prickly wildcat only got clingy when she felt threatened. The moment we walked in, Rushua locked eyes with Louis, let out a cold snort, and pulled me to the seat farthest from her. Then she started, putting on a show, calling me husband, extra loud, piling meat into my bowl, saying I must be tired from last night and needed to eat well. She kept shooting looks at Louis, making pointed comments about how some people wake up too early while we prefer to stay in bed. I wanted to crawl under the table. She was basically announcing our bedroom activities to the whole room. Louis didn't take the bait at all. She just smiled softly, played a little hurt, and said she'd prepared breakfast because she knew we'd had a hard night. She put emphasis on hard in a way that was both sympathetic and teasing. Rushua's punch landed on cotton. She couldn't find anything to actually fight about, which just frustrated her more. Then Rushua noticed something odd. There were two identical plates of white-cut chicken on the table, looking exactly the same. I figured it out instantly. Louis was running a comparison test, the smartest possible way to prove what we'd been doing in that kitchen yesterday. No amount of explaining could match a direct taste demonstration. Brilliant move. I made a mental note to steal this technique for future domestic disputes. I played the perfect wingman, picking up chicken from the first plate and feeding it to Rushua. She blushed, but ate it in front of Louis to hold her ground. She chewed, shrugged, said it was fine, normal chicken, nothing special. Then I fed her a piece from the second plate. One bite, and her eyes went huge. A pure, clean, incredible flavor exploded on her tongue. No bitterness, no grit, just perfect saltiness that elevated the chicken to a completely different level. She couldn't believe it. She grabbed another piece herself to make sure. Same result. "How is the difference this big?" she asked, stunned. "Did you hire a new cook?" Louis calmly reminded her. "Remember yesterday in the kitchen? I told you. Your husband made snow-white salt." It all clicked. The salt she'd ignored while screaming at me yesterday. The business blueprint. Louis had been trying to explain while Rushua was busy dragging me out by the ear. It was all about this. She turned to stare at me in disbelief. The same guy she'd been chasing around the manor like a criminal had quietly created something that could reshape the entire empire's food industry. Rushua stood frozen, her face cycling through red and white as everything clicked. She remembered kicking down the kitchen door, ignoring the salt Louis tried to show her, and then spending the last hour making snide remarks at her own sister-in-law. After tasting the difference between ordinary salt and my snow salt, her jealousy suddenly looked petty and childish. Then she did something that surprised even me. She stood up, turned to Louis, and bowed deeply, a full 90-degree apology. Her voice was stiff but completely sincere. She said she'd been impulsive and wrong to accuse her. Louis rushed to help her up, touched and amused at the same time. That was Rushua in a nutshell. Proud as they come, But when she knew she was wrong, she owned it without hesitation. Rushua straightened up, shot me a glare that clearly meant, "Don't you dare mess with my third sister," and announced she had to go supervise morning training. Then she marched out at triple speed, practically fleeing from embarrassment. Once she was gone, the atmosphere shifted completely. Lu Yi poured me tea with that effortless elegance of hers, teasing me about having even the Ice Queen wrapped around my finger. I joked that everything I did was for the Lin family's grand plan, pure selfless dedication. She didn't buy a word of it. Then she got serious. She'd been up all night working. She led me to her study, which looked like a tornado had hit it. Papers, ledgers, and books piled everywhere. She unrolled a large map and started laying out the situation. Black Wind City salt was monopolized by the Chun family salt shop, selling gritty, bitter garbage at 5 times the normal price. The people either paid up or ate bland food. Destroying the Batian gang had only touched a small piece of the city's underworld. Selling snow salt would be cutting into something much bigger. She explained that Black Wind City technically belonged to the Empire, but was really lawless territory controlled by 4 gangs. The Green Dragon Society in the east ran slaves and mines. The White Wolf stronghold in the west controlled trade routes and fenced goods for the barbarian tribes. The Red Phoenix Hall in the south ran gambling houses, brothels, and, most importantly, intelligence networks. And the Black Tiger Gang in the north controlled the 2 most profitable commodities, salt and iron. The gang we'd already crushed was just a stray dog. The Black Tiger Gang was a real tiger. Selling snow salt wouldn't just embarrass them. It would be digging up their ancestors' graves and attacking their lifeline. We had to be prepared for the worst. We could end up dead with nothing left to bury. She looked straight at me and asked, "Are you afraid?" She'd laid every risk bare, not to scare me off, but to test me. She wanted to know if I was the kind of man who'd play this dangerous game alongside her. I looked at the fire burning in her eyes, the nervousness, the hope, the all-or-nothing madness. Salt could make our family rich. Iron could make us strong. With both, we'd finally have real power in this city that ate people alive. I put my hand over hers on the map and grinned. Afraid? Third sister, I'm only afraid the game won't be exciting enough. Something shifted in her eyes. She saw the same hunger in me that burned in her. Not fear, but pure thrill. She'd found her partner. Good, she said, taking a deep breath, her whole presence blazing with determination. Her intimacy jumped 5 points. Over the next few days, I learned what it meant to have a truly incredible partner. Louis's speed was terrifying. Day 1, she bought up huge stretches of the worthless salt flats outside the city for practically nothing. Day 2, she had the best craftsmen in the city building from blueprints she'd drawn overnight. Day 3, hiring notices went up everywhere refugees gathered, offering wages well above market rate. Desperate people came flooding in with their families. She was on site from before dawn until after dark every day, wrapped head to toe in black clothes with a veiled hat hiding her face. Even so, her soft voice carried across the construction site and kept making the shirtless workers lose focus and swing their hammers the wrong way. She didn't notice. She was too busy adjusting layouts, yelling at builders, and haggling suppliers down 30% until they wanted to cry. I became the world's laziest boss. My daily routine was sitting under her personal shade tent on a little stool, drinking cold plum juice, calling myself her bodyguard and chief technical consultant. When I offered her a drink and said her voice was our most valuable asset, she told me to go check on the water tanks instead of running my mouth. I told her I couldn't leave. What if she got sunstroke and needed mouth-to-mouth? She was too annoyed to even respond. Life was perfect. She makes the money. I look pretty. Meanwhile, across town in the North District, someone wasn't happy. Chen Wanjin, boss of the Black Tiger Gang, sat in his mansion polishing a pair of walnut shells supposedly soaked in human fat from his enemies. His idiot son Chen Chong dismissed us as a bunch of exiled nobodies playing in the dirt, but the old man shut him down cold. He didn't care whether we could succeed. The point was that salt belonged to him. Always had. Anyone who even thought about touching it was breaking his rules. Salt and iron were his absolute bottom line, the foundation of his power over the entire North District. When his son volunteered to smash our site and break my legs, the old man called him a fool. They were businessmen, not street thugs. Everything needed a proper excuse. He called in a shadow named Three Blades and gave his orders. Visit the salt flats tomorrow. Tell the Lin family they owe protection fees and make them understand certain things aren't theirs to touch. If I was smart, I'd tear down the site myself and crawl back to being a useless young lord. If I wasn't smart, I'd stay at that salt flat permanently, buried under it. That night, on the carriage ride home, Louis was completely spent. She'd fallen asleep against my shoulder, her work clothes and veil removed, moonlight falling across her white dress. Her hair spilled onto my neck. Without her sharp businesswoman expression, she looked soft and fragile. I genuinely admired her. A pampered rich girl who could throw on rough clothes, stand under a blazing sun, and work side by side with laborers and craftsmen all day. That kind of toughness would put most men to shame. When the carriage stopped and the driver started to announce our arrival, I hushed him quickly. I slid my arms under her and lifted her up in a princess carry. She was light, but felt substantial in my arms. She stirred slightly, frowning in her sleep, and mumbled something about needing to negotiate lumber prices down another 5%. I almost laughed out loud. Even in her dreams, she was cutting costs. What a little miser. I carried her through the manor toward her courtyard. Every servant we passed bowed low and pretended not to look, but the gossip fires behind their eyes were already burning bright. Louis's bedroom smelled faintly of orchids, just like I'd imagined. I laid her gently on the bed and pulled up the blanket to cover her. She was completely defenseless, lips slightly parted, breathing softly. My heart was pounding. For a split second my mind went somewhere it shouldn't have, but no, I don't do that kind of thing. Just as I was about to leave, her eyelashes fluttered and she opened her eyes, still hazy with sleep. She asked if I'd carried her back. I told her she'd been sleeping like a little pig and I couldn't exactly leave her in the carriage overnight. She laughed instead of getting angry. Then she stretched, which was extremely distracting, and said she'd reward me for being so thoughtful. My imagination went into overdrive. But instead of anything romantic, she pulled folded blueprints from inside her robe and patted the bed next to her, asking me to sit down and discuss her ideas. Blueprints. In the middle of the night. Alone in her bedroom. She wanted to talk about work. I tried to bail, saying it looked improper for us to be alone together like this. She completely ignored me and switched into business mode like flipping a switch. She said keeping the salt recipe secret was more important than production itself. Her plan was to build high walls around the workshop and have Rushiwa's guards patrol day and night. I told her that was too basic. Real security wasn't about keeping people out. It was about making sure that even if someone got in, they couldn't understand what they saw. And even if they understood, they couldn't replicate it. And even if they could replicate it, they couldn't take it with them. She froze, trying to process that. I explained, split the entire purification process into 5 separate steps. Each step goes to a different team in a different room. Each team only knows their one tiny task: add 2 buckets of water, or dump this black stuff in and stir. Nobody knows what happens before or after their step. Everyone's just one meaningless screw in the machine. Even if a spy bought off one worker, they'd only get one useless puzzle piece. Her intimacy jumped 5 points. Then I went further. We could plant fake steps, add some harmless nonsense ingredient at one stage, and spread the word that it was our ancestral secret formula. Any spy who stole that information would waste fortunes trying to make worthless fake ingredients work, chasing a dead end we designed for them. She burst out laughing so hard she collapsed onto the bed, calling me rotten to the core. Then her eyes softened and she said, "But I like it. 5 more intimacy points." This woman said I was terrible while her affection meter kept climbing. Very honest. She sat back up, leaning close enough that I could see the tiny hairs on her cheeks and the faint blush spreading across her skin. She asked what I meant by, "Can't take it with them." I said it was even simpler, and I'd draw it out for her. Then I pointed at her bedsheet as my canvas. Her face went red. I'd just turned her bed into a whiteboard, and she didn't know whether to be impressed or exasperated. I started drawing on her bedsheet with my finger, explaining my idea for a multi-layer evaporation crystallization tower. She'd never heard of anything like it. I told her to think of it as a giant steamer standing upright. We'd pour salt water in from the top and let it flow down through specially designed channels, layer by layer. Instead of open flames, we'd pipe in hot steam through sealed ceramic tubes to heat each level. Way more efficient, The fuel savings alone could fund another salt operation. Better yet, we'd capture the evaporated steam, cool it down, and sell the clean water. In a place like Black Wind City, even fresh water was worth money. Her breathing got faster with every sentence. Her merchant brain was converting every word into silver. The salt water would get more concentrated as it flowed down. By the bottom layer, it'd be fully saturated. Cool it slightly, and perfect white crystals would form on their own. The real genius was the security angle. The tower's internal structure would be incredibly complex. Precise angles, specific pipe sizes, custom ceramic parts that couldn't be bought anywhere else. Even if competitors stole our workers or dismantled the whole tower, they'd never figure out how it actually worked. That's what a real technical barrier looks like. She stared at me with her mouth open, then called me a monster. I winked at her. She yawned, eyes watering from exhaustion. Her head started drooping until it landed on my shoulder, and she fell asleep right there. Her arms wrapped around my waist without her even knowing it. Every fiber of my being screamed to do something, but she was exhausted, and taking advantage of that wasn't my style. So I lay down beside her, telling myself I'd just rest my eyes for a minute. The orchid scent and her warmth pulled me under fast. I dreamed I was lost in a desert, starving and dying of thirst. I found a stream and something round, soft, and fragrant next to it, a big steamed bun. I was chomping away happily when it flew off. Then something cold smacked me right in the face. I woke up with my cheeks stinging. Bright daylight. Louie was gone from the bed, only her warmth and scent remaining. I found her in the outer room eating porridge. 2 breakfasts were set out. She'd prepared one for me. Sweet of her. I sat down and started eating. She wouldn't look at me or talk to me. Total silence. I tried breaking the ice, asking why she didn't wake me. She threw my own words back at me. You slept like a pig, couldn't wake you with thunder. Should I have dragged you out of bed and spoon-fed you? Clever. Using my own lines against me. But something was off. Her eyes kept darting away from mine, and her cheeks had a suspicious pink tint. I figured I should clear the air about accidentally sleeping in her bed, so I started with, about last night. Clap. She slammed her chopsticks on the table, face blazing red, announced she was done eating, and practically sprinted out of the room. I sat there completely baffled. All I did was fall asleep next to her, and she was the one who held on to me. What was she so worked up about? Then my cheek throbbed again. That slap from my dream. That wasn't a dream stone, was it? Wait, did something happen last night that I don't remember? Something involving a steamed bun. That wasn't actually a steamed bun? Honestly, I had no idea what was going on. Women are confusing. The carriage ride to the salt field was painfully quiet. Louie had her back to me the entire time, staring out the window without a word. I couldn't figure out what I'd done wrong. I swore I hadn't touched her last night. It was a purely innocent sleep. Maybe I snored, talked in my sleep, drooled. I had no clue. With nothing else to do, I pulled up my system. Louie's portrait was still grayed out, but suddenly it erupted in golden light. Her panel had activated. The intimacy must have crossed the threshold from last night's business talks and the accidental sleepover. Her portrait appeared. Louie curled up in a chair reading accounts, biting a pen, one bare foot peeking out from under her dress with her cute toes curling as she thought. Pure art appreciation, obviously. Her stats: beauty 99, intimacy 68, labeled lingering sweetness. Her talent was called Crystal Heart, and the effect was incredible. Glazed eyes that could see through all things, perceive the flow of fortune, and pierce any illusion. Then I read the activation condition and nearly spat blood. I had to get Louie to willingly wash my feet and say, "Husband, is the water temperature comfortable? Was the system insane?" This was the future business queen of Black Wind City. If I stuck my feet in front of her and asked her to wash them, she wouldn't use warm water. She'd use boiling water and smile while asking if it was comfortable enough. I started sweating, but I figured I'd try a roundabout approach. I casually mentioned she must be exhausted from running to the construction site every day and offered to prepare hot water and wash her feet tonight. Give her a nice massage. My brilliant plan. I wash hers first, then she'd naturally return the favor. Perfectly reasonable, right? She looked at me and said 2 words, "Don't want." Then she went back to staring out the window. Fine. This would take time. At the salt field, she transformed instantly. The awkward, silent woman from the carriage vanished, replaced by the commanding business queen. She marched through the site checking on stone cutting, lumber supplies, and construction progress, asking sharp questions that left the burly foreman nodding in admiration. I followed behind, genuinely impressed. If I had to manage all this, my head would explode. Some things really need to be left to the professionals. I was nodding approvingly when a harsh voice suddenly cut through the construction noise from the entrance. "Everyone stop what you're doing. Right now." A harsh voice ripped through the construction site. Some thug kicked over a stack of lumber, injuring an old worker. Then about 15 men with blades swaggered in like they owned the place. The whole site went dead silent. Louis pressed close to me, grabbing the corner of my sleeve. I could feel her tension. Their leader was a lean guy with a centipede-shaped scar on his face, Li Three Blades, one of Chun Wanjin's enforcers. He looked me over, clearly unimpressed by my clean clothes and pale face. Just another soft rich boy to him. He jammed his knife into the ground in front of me and asked if I was Lin Mo. I stayed on my little stool, calm as could be, and offered him some cold plum juice. His lackey cursed at me. Li Three Blades stopped him, then announced this was Black Tiger Gang territory. Official papers meant nothing here. If we wanted to keep building, we owed protection money, 1,000 silver taels per day. The workers gasped. That wasn't a fee, it was robbery. Louis stepped forward to argue, but I held her back. I stood up, still smiling, and tilted my head like I was thinking it over. 1,000? Isn't that a bit low? How about I give you 10,000? Dead silence. One of his guys burst out laughing, calling me an idiot. Li Three Blades backhanded him so hard teeth flew out, then turned back to me with murder in his eyes. Won't drink the toast? Fine, you'll drink the penalty. He ordered his men to attack. They roared and charged, blades flashing. I moved. The first one didn't even see me coming. I was already in front of him before he could swing. One strike to his knee, a clean snap. His leg bent the wrong way, and he went down. Then I tore through the rest. I targeted joints, knees, elbows, ankles, shoulders. I'd learned this from watching Rushua destroy Zhang Kuei at training, except I hit much harder. Crack, 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 crack. The sound of breaking bones popped like firecrackers. In seconds, every single one of them was writhing on the ground with all four limbs bent at unnatural angles. Alive, but completely ruined. The screaming faded into weak gasping. The workers stood frozen with their mouths open. Louis had her hand over her lips, eyes wide behind her veil. She'd seen me crush that bully Wang Daba before, peeking through a window crack. But this was different. This wasn't a fight, it was a one-sided massacre. Li Three Blades was the last one standing, his confident sneer replaced by pure terror. He backed away, stammering at me not to come closer. I walked up to him without a word and stomped down on his right knee. It folded backwards into a V shape. He screamed and dropped, but his hand instinctively reached behind his back, going for a hidden poison dagger he'd used to kill stronger opponents than me throughout his career. Before he could pull it, I had a blade at his throat. "What are you reaching for?" He froze, feeling the cold steel against his neck. He raised his left hand in surrender while his right still gripped the dagger behind his back. He started babbling about talking things through. He never finished the sentence. I cut his throat. A spray of red mist arced through the sunlight. Li Three Blades grabbed his throat, eyes bulging with disbelief. He couldn't understand how someone who looked so harmless could kill without blinking. His poisoned dagger clattered to the ground, and he collapsed into his own blood. I wiped the blade on his clothes and looked around at the groaning thugs on the ground. They went silent the instant my eyes swept over them. The workers stood frozen too. Watching someone die right in front of you hits different than seeing broken bones. I tried to lighten the mood, told everyone they'd get double pay today, and to relax and get back to work. They hesitated until the site manager stammered out that they should thank me, and slowly the construction noise picked back up. I had a few brave workers tie up the surviving gang members and drag them to a corner like rolled-up carpets. Louis recovered quickly and grasped the situation. She sent a servant racing back to the manor to tell Rushua what happened and request armed guards. She understood. This wasn't business competition anymore. This was war. She pulled me into the shade tent and brought a basin of water. She took out a silk handkerchief from her robe, wet it, and started cleaning the blood off my hands. I could feel her fingers trembling. I broke the silence. We couldn't wait for them to regroup. We had to strike first. The gap between now and when Chen Wanjin assembled his forces was our best window. She nodded, still shaky but already thinking clearly. Ru Xue was on her way, and if it was going to be a fight to the death, better to attack first. While she stepped out to dump the bloody water, I checked my system panel. I'd reached body tempering stage 3, thanks to my nightly training sessions with Ru Xue. The tenacity trait I'd gotten from her dance was supposed to greatly reduce physical damage, but I'd never tested it. I grabbed the steel blade and slashed my own hand. Hard. Instead of cutting deep, it barely left a white mark. A few tiny blood drops appeared seconds later. That was impressive. I'd used real force. This trait was even better than expected. Lu Yi walked back in and immediately saw the fresh wound and the knife in my hand. She lunged forward, snatched the blade away, and threw it across the tent. Are you insane? You just killed someone and now you're cutting yourself? Are you getting addicted to violence? She was genuinely scared, not of me, but for me. Worried that killing would change who I was. Her concern warmed my heart. I took her cold, trembling hand and held it tight. Why so nervous? I was just testing if the blade was sharp enough. What if Chen Wanjin shows up and this thing's too dull to cut his neck? She choked on her own anger. I looked down at her hand and asked why she was shaking. She denied it and tried to pull away, but I held on tighter. I brought her fingers close to my lips and blew gently. She went rigid. You're scared I'll become a monster who kills without feeling, aren't you? She pressed her lips together and said nothing. I leaned in until our noses almost touched. Don't worry, third sister. I know exactly what I'm doing. Back at the Chen family mansion, their spy delivered the bad news. Chen Wanjin sat there calmly rolling his creepy human fat walnuts while his idiot son Qin Chong screamed about wanting to chop me into dog food. The other gang leaders joined in, howling for blood. Chen Wanjin shut them all up with 2 quiet words. After hearing exactly how I destroyed 15 armed fighters with bare fists in seconds, even his son went pale. The old man knew he'd kicked an iron plate. But he was smart, smarter than his thugs. He wasn't going to throw bodies at me. Instead, he gave orders to cut off our supply chain. Visit every stone and lumber supplier. Tell them that doing business with the Lin family meant war with the Black Tiger Gang. Spread the word that any worker who showed up at our salt field would end up in a sack at the bottom of the moat. Let me fight all I want. If I couldn't buy a single brick or hire a single worker, I'd be building that salt field alone. He also told his men to beef up security and stop going out alone, in case I came for them first. Smart old fox. Meanwhile, at the salt field, I had a pile of tied-up gang members to deal with. Lu Yi followed behind me, still pale and fighting nausea at the sight, but forcing herself to stay. I crouched next to one who looked like a minor leader and planted the blade an inch from his eyeball. He tried playing tough. Kill me if you want. I live by loyalty, so I stabbed him through the neck. The guy next to him broke instantly, screaming and begging. I smiled and told him to relax. We were just doing a little market research. I started asking everything about Chen Wanjin. Where he lived, how many guards, when they changed shifts, what he liked to eat, whether he snored. The guy spilled it all. Zhujiue Street Mansion, 200 guards, shift change every 2 hours, loved braised pork knuckle, snored like thunder. Once one talked, the rest couldn't confess fast enough. I just had to wave the knife, and they'd trip over each other volunteering information. Secret gambling den in the South District. 3 hidden warehouses. 1 in an abandoned temple, 1 at the docks, 1 inside the mansion. The son was a womanizer, the 3rd captain was a drunk, the 5th captain preferred men. They turned the Black Tiger Gang completely inside out. Lu Yi stood behind me, initially horrified, but as the information poured out, her eyes started glowing. That merchant brain of hers was already sorting through the chaos, picking out weak points and opportunities. Then she spoke up, her voice suddenly sharp and clear. Wait. Lu Yi zeroed in on the captured thugs like a professional auditor. She started grilling them about the underground casino, monthly cash flow, who kept the books, business partners, exact location. The guy looked completely lost. I leaned over and whispered that her and I should start a company together specializing in hostile takeovers. She blushed and told me to stop joking around, but I could tell the tension in her had eased. Having me crack jokes seemed to make even murder feel less heavy. Then Ru Xue arrived with 30 elite guards, looking frantic until she saw we were fine. When she spotted the pile of broken bodies in the corner, she stared at me in disbelief. Even someone who'd seen plenty of fighting had never witnessed anything this brutal. We huddled in the tent, and I laid out everything we'd squeezed from the prisoners. My plan: don't wait for Chen Wanjin to strike back. Hit him first, his 2 secret warehouses in the west and at the docks. Liu Yi added that we should also smash his underground casino, since it was on Red Phoenix Hall territory, meaning it was probably a sore spot between gangs we could exploit. Rushua wanted to split up and tackle everything together, but I told her to take all the guards to the warehouses and make maximum noise. The casino, I'd handle alone. They both objected. I explained that a group would be spotted immediately, while I could slip in and out like a ghost. Anyone with me would only slow me down. I told Rushua to get back to the manor before dark no matter what. As long as our home base was secure, I could fight freely. She studied me for a long moment, then agreed. She was starting to realize I wasn't just the clown who cracked jokes all day. Liu Yi dismissed the workers with full pay and cleared the site. Rushua blazed off toward the west with her guards. I insisted on escorting Liu Yi safely home first. In the carriage, she wasn't ignoring me this time. She was staring straight at me with a look full of curiosity and worry. After a long silence, she finally asked the question she'd been holding back. Who are you really? How did you suddenly become this strong? Those things you talked about, assembly lines, crystallization towers, I've never heard of any of it. What happened to you? She wasn't stupid. People don't transform like this overnight. I couldn't tell her the truth, so I gave her a version of it. What if I told you I had a very long dream? I described my previous life as a dream world. Iron birds that flew through the sky, metal boxes that traveled thousands of miles and hours, tiny devices that let you talk to people across the world. I told her about skyscrapers, the internet, factories, and science. I said I'd lived there a long time, learned everything I could, and then one day woke up back here as a changed person. She listened quietly without interrupting. When I finished, she didn't look shocked or call me crazy. She just watched me with those clear, perceptive eyes. After a long pause, she asked, "Was that world fun?" I laughed. "It was okay. Too fast, too stressful. Not as nice as here." Then she asked the question that mattered. "Will you go back?" I shook my head and grinned. Go back to what? Delivering food? Working overtime? Why would I, when I've got good food, a nice house, and beautiful sisters-in-law to look at? She rolled her eyes at me. But I noticed her shoulders relax, and something settled behind those pretty eyes. Her intimacy went up 5 more points. At the manor gate, I jumped off the carriage and told Liu Yi to stay inside until I got back. She nodded but didn't move. As I turned to leave, a soft hand caught mine from behind. "Be careful," she whispered, barely louder than a kitten. I squeezed her hand, patted it gently, and grinned. "Don't worry, third sister. When I get back, you're washing my feet." Then I vanished around the corner, leaving her standing there, probably staring at her hand and stammering, "Wash feet?" While I headed out, Chen Wanjin's poison was spreading fast across the city. His thugs visited every supplier we worked with. They kicked down the stone quarry owner's door at bedtime and told him if one more rock went to our salt field, his quarry would, accidentally, collapse. They dragged the biggest lumber dealer to their headquarters for tea and suggested he pick the winning side. Rumors flew everywhere. Anyone who worked at our salt field would end up at the bottom of the river. The workers who cheered for me that morning were now hiding behind locked doors. At the Chun mansion, his son Qinchong was celebrating like it was a holiday, laughing about how I'd be building my salt field with bare hands since nobody would sell me materials or show up for work. But the old man wasn't satisfied. Cutting our supplies was just the appetizer. He wanted me destroyed, worse than dead. He ordered his son to stake out our manor starting tomorrow. Any man who came out would be killed, wrapped in a straw mat, and dumped at our gate after dark. Any woman would be stripped naked and hung from a public arch for the whole city to see. When Qinchong asked what to do if they caught my sisters-in-law, especially Liu Yi, his sick eyes lit up with excitement. The old man told him he could have his fun, just don't kill them. He wanted them alive so he could use them to break me. He sat back, sipping tea, fantasizing about me kneeling before him begging for mercy. Then a messenger crashed through the door, falling to his knees in panic. "The dock warehouse, it's been hit. Everything's gone. The weapons, all of it, stolen and burned. Fires still blazing." The room erupted. Chen Chong grabbed the messenger by the collar, screaming for details. Every gang leader was howling for blood, demanding to attack our manor immediately. Chen Wanjin slammed his fist on the table and silenced everyone. He forced himself calm and asked if there was anything else. The trembling messenger pulled out a bloody piece of cloth found nailed to the warehouse door. 4 characters were written on it. "Thanks, boss." The old man nearly coughed up blood. We'd stolen hundreds of thousands of silver worth of his weapons, torched his warehouse, and left a thank you note. "Lin Mo, I'll destroy your entire bloodline." I wish I could have been there to see his face. Chen Chong went berserk when he saw my "Thanks, boss" note, screaming about grinding me into paste. But old Chen Wanjin shut him up and started thinking clearly. He realized I'd never planned to play defense. I'd already stabbed him while he was still setting up his chess pieces. The old fox made 3 moves at once. He sent 100 men to the Western Temple warehouse as a loud distraction. He ordered his son to rush to the casino, Drunk Wind Tower, and move all the goods out before I got there. And he personally led the rest of his forces toward our manor, planning to slaughter everyone while our fighters were away. Meanwhile, Rushua was riding hard toward the temple warehouse when something stopped her. She remembered my words. Get back to the manor before dark, no matter what. That gut feeling hit her. She yanked her horse around and ordered everyone back to Dingbei Manor. I was already in the shadows behind Drunk Wind Tower, watching the back entrance. Sure enough, Chen Chong showed up with 8 bodyguards, all clearly trained fighters. They went inside and soon came back out pushing carts covered in heavy cloth, heading into the dark alleys. I followed like smoke. In a narrow dead-end passage, I started picking them off from behind. One by one, a hand over the mouth, a quick snap of the neck, hidden by the sound of rolling wheels. By the time Chen Chong turned around to yell at his men for being slow, every single bodyguard was gone. Just empty carts in an empty alley. He drew his short blade, screaming into the darkness, then dropped his father's name like a shield. That's when I knew I'd hooked the big fish. I'd been about to snap his neck too, but Chen Wanjin's son was worth more alive. I appeared behind him. He spun and slashed wildly, the hardest swing of his life. I caught his wrist and slapped the blade away like swatting a fly. He was terrified, backing up, and then recognition hit. "You're Lin Mo." He knew he was dead if he stayed. He screamed and hurled a heavy money pouch at my face. I dodged, and that was his real play. From his sleeve, a small brass weapon appeared, a sleeve-mounted pistol bought from Western traders. At point-blank range, it could punch through iron. Bang! The bullet grazed my cheek, ripping a line of blood across my face and blasting a hole in the wall behind me. Pain tore through me, but my tenacity trait kept it from being worse. He was ecstatic, already pulling out a second pistol from his other sleeve. Dual-wielding, the barrel aimed straight at my forehead. "You think being a good fighter matters? Against my guns, you're dead meat." Bang. The second shot was aimed right between my eyes, but I charged forward instead of dodging back. The bullet missed my head and punched into my left shoulder instead. The pain was unreal, tearing flesh mixed with burning gunpowder. My tenacity trait kicked in hard, stopping the iron ball from going deeper, but it still hurt like hell. None of that mattered compared to how angry I was. I was already in his face before his grin could fully form. I kicked him right between the legs with everything I had. His scream could have woken the dead. He doubled over like a shrimp, eyes bulging, drool and tears flying everywhere. Then I stomped both his wrists, 2 clean snaps. He rolled on the ground like a worm, shrieking about his hands. I looked at my shoulder. Blood had soaked through my shirt, and the bullet was still inside. Every breath pulled at the wound, but I had work to do. I picked up both sleeve pistols, beautiful brass things with carved patterns. I pressed one against Chen Chong's forehead. He stopped screaming instantly and begged for his life, dropping his father's name again. I laughed. I wasn't going to kill him. He was too valuable as a hostage. Besides, the guns were empty. I moved to the carts. 7 or 8 of them, all covered in heavy cloth. I cracked open a box expecting gold or weapons. Instead, I found oil paper packages filled with black powder. I rubbed some between my fingers and smelled it. Gunpowder. Military grade, strictly controlled gunpowder. So that was Chen Wanjin's real business. Salt and iron were just the surface. Illegal gunpowder smuggling was where the real money came from. This was a death sentence offense. I activated my system storage. One touch per box, and they vanished into thin air. Chen Chong watched with his jaw hanging open as crate after crate disappeared before his eyes, completely unable to process what he was seeing. When every cart was empty, I grabbed him by the collar, hauled him up, and told him I was taking him home. My home. Meanwhile, Rushua had made the smartest decision of the night. Halfway to the Western Temple, she'd remembered my warning. Get back to the manor before dark. Her instincts screamed something was wrong, so she wheeled her whole force around. She made it back just in time. The gates were still closed, everything looked normal. But seconds after she dismounted, torches appeared at the end of the street. Hundreds of them. Chen Wanjin himself was leading over 300 armed men straight at our front door. If she'd been even a few minutes later, everyone inside, Lu Yi, the pregnant Su Qinghua, all the servants, would have been slaughtered. She screamed orders. Gates shut, barred with heavy beams. She sent the manager to evacuate all servants and maids to the back compound and lock every door. Then it was just her and 30 elite guards in the front courtyard, weapons drawn, forming a tight defensive formation. Boom, boom, boom. The battering started. Each hit shook the whole mansion. Cracks split the gates, wood chips flying. Then the doors burst open with a deafening crash. Chen Wanjin and 300 Black Tiger gang fighters poured in like a flood. While I was dealing with Chen Chong and his gunpowder carts, the real battle was happening back home. Chen Wanjin brought over 300 armed men to our front gate. When he broke through and saw only Rushua and 30 guards standing in the courtyard, he laughed like a madman. To him, it looked like an empty bathhouse. No defenses, no army, just one woman and a handful of men against his flood of fighters. He was dead wrong. Those 30 weren't ordinary guards. They were veterans who'd served under Rushua's father, the Tiger General, and crawled out of real battlefields soaked in blood. Their lives belonged to the Qin family. Rushua wasn't their employer. She was their young general. Dying for her was their honor. One of them slammed his blade handle against his chest and roared their old war cry. Qin family army. Never surrender. All 30 echoed. Fight to the death. Fight to the death. The sound hit Chen Wanjin's men like a physical wall. Some actually hesitated mid-charge. Then Rushua gave her first command. Formation. What happened next was the complete version of the 10 Directions Annihilation Array, the real one I'd given her from the system. She'd been studying it day and night, drilling these 30 men until every movement was second nature. 10 men on the outer ring slammed iron shields into the ground, locking together into a seamless circular wall. Long spears thrust through the gaps like fangs. In the center stood Rushua and 10 more fighters with heavy blades, ready to cut down anyone who broke through. The first wave of attackers never even touched the shields. A dozen throats and chests were punctured by spears before they knew what happened. Bodies piled up in front of the iron wall. Then Rushua called the rotation. The entire formation began spinning counterclockwise like a giant gear. The shields deflected incoming force while the spears kept harvesting lives from every angle. Men who raised their swords got smashed by rotating shields and skewered by 3 spears from different directions simultaneously. It wasn't a fight. It was a meat grinder. 30 people had become a machine, an iron hedgehog that devoured attackers from every direction. Rushua stood at the center, eyes blazing with shock and joy. This was the formation I'd given her, and its real-world power exceeded anything she'd imagined. She was probably thinking about how many more secrets I was hiding. In half the time it takes to burn a stick of incense, Chen Wanjin had lost nearly a third of his men. Not a single defender had fallen. The old man finally screamed for retreat, his calculated confidence shattered. But he wasn't done. Red-faced with humiliation and rage, he pointed at the moon gate leading to the back compound. Go around them. Break into the back. Kill everyone inside. Men, women, children. All of them. I'll break her formation with Lin family blood. While I was across the city dealing with Chen Chong, everything I'd feared was playing out at home. Chen Wanjin couldn't break through Rushua's formation head-on, so he ordered his men to go around, bypass the iron wall, and rush the back compound to slaughter everyone. Inside, Rushua instantly shifted the formation from a spinning circle into a snake, a moving shield wall that slid sideways to block the only path to the back courtyard. Spears jutted out like a forest of death, and more bodies piled up in front of the moon gate. But the old fox wasn't done. While his men threw themselves at the shields as a distraction, using dead comrades as battering rams, he sent 2 assassins over the side walls. One thin as bamboo, one short as a pumpkin, both silent killers with incredible agility. They slipped into the back compound where all the women and servants had gathered in my quarters. Lu Yi was standing by the window, staring toward the front courtyard, worried sick about Rushua and about me. She heard a faint click at the window. Before she could even shout a warning, the thin one was on her, hand over her mouth, blade at her throat. 2 guards rushed in and were killed before they even saw what hit them, blood spraying across Lu Yi's face. She didn't freeze. Even being dragged away, she ripped the gold hairpin from her head and stabbed at the assassin's eye. He dodged, barely, taking a slash across the cheek. Then he chopped the back of her neck, and she went limp. They carried her unconscious body to the front courtyard and announced themselves. The moment Rushua saw Lu Yi with a blade pressed against her white neck, she screamed for everyone to stop fighting. The formation froze. Chen Wanjin laughed like he'd won the lottery. One hostage was worth more than killing 100 guards. Rushua was shaking with fury, calling him a shameless old dog for using such dirty tactics. He just sneered, "Can face buy me dinner? Ever heard of deception in war?" Then he pointed at Lu Yi's limp body and gave Rushua a choice. Drop your weapons, get on your knees, and surrender. Or he'd slit Lu Yi's throat right in front of her, one slow cut at a time. Just when everything seemed lost, Rushua trapped, Lu Yi with a blade at her throat, Chen Wanjin gloating. Something flew over the wall and crashed at the old man's feet. That something was his son. I'd beaten Qin Chong into barely recognizable meat on the way back. When I reached the manor and heard the fighting, I saw Lu Yi being held hostage. I needed a distraction, and I had one, Qin Chong himself. I threw him over the wall like a sack of garbage. He hit the stone pavement hard, barely alive. The whole courtyard froze. Everyone stared at the bloody mess on the ground. Chen Wanjin's eyes locked on the expensive silk clothes he recognized. Then his son's mangled mouth croaked one word, "Dad." The old man's world shattered. His only son, his only heir, his entire legacy, gone. The area between Chun Chong's legs was destroyed. Even if he'd survived, the Chun bloodline was finished. While every eye was on that horror show, I dropped silently from the wall. Nobody saw me. I ghosted behind the 2 assassins holding Lu Yi. I grabbed Bamboo Stick's own knife and drove it through his throat, in one side and out the other. Then I grabbed Pumpkin's head and twisted it backwards, both dead before they hit the ground. I caught Lu Yi as she fell and carried her behind Rushua's formation. The guards closed ranks around us instantly. Qin Chong whispered, "Lin Mo," and died in his father's arms. Chen Wanjin went absolutely insane, screaming for his assassins to slit Lu Yi's throat. But when he turned to look, both his killers were lying dead, and the hostage was safely behind the shield wall. I looked at him, didn't say a word, just looked at him with nothing in my eyes. That silence broke something in Rushua. Lu Yi was her sister, her family, and this man had used her family as a bargaining chip. Formation change. Kill. The defensive snake formation exploded open. The shields split apart, and the blade fighters surged forward. No more defense. This was pure offense. 30 soldiers became a spinning blade of flesh and fury, tearing into the remaining gang members like a harvesting machine through wheat. No war cries. Just the wet thud of steel meeting flesh and the snap of breaking bones. It was rage made physical. Chen Wanjin watched his men fall and rose, the killing machine grinding closer and closer. He knew it was over. Retreat. Retreat. His surviving men stampeded toward the gate. But Rushua wasn't letting him go. She launched herself over the crowd like a red arrow, her sword screaming through the air. One horizontal slash. Both of Chen Wanjin's legs separated at the knees. He collapsed in a fountain of blood. She stood over him, sword aimed at his heart, ready to finish it. "Leave him alive," I said. She whipped around, eyes demanding to know why. I walked over to Chen Wanjin, looked down at the legless old man bleeding out on my courtyard stones, and smiled. Once I get what I want from him, then we kill him. That night, we blew the lid off Blackwind City. If buying the unwanted Dingbei Manor had made us a joke, wiping out the Black Tiger Gang in one night was like dropping a bomb into the city's powder keg. The news spread to every corner before sunrise. In the east, the Green Dragon Society's boss Li Qing was down in his slave mines, whipping a worker half to death when a messenger stumbled in with the news. He couldn't believe it. 300 armed men destroyed by 30 guards in a single evening? He slapped the messenger across the room. His entire philosophy was built on having more men and being more ruthless, and someone had just proven that formula wrong. He ordered his people to watch our manner closely. He wanted to know what we were really about. In the west, the White Wolf Stronghold's leader Helion Tual, a sharp-eyed half-blood with the cunning of both peoples, listened to the full report while polishing his curved blade. He found it fascinating. A sickly exile and 9 widows had killed the North District's old fox. He walked to his map, drew an X over the Black Tiger Gang's territory, and compared me to a fish that had muddied the entire pond. He sent his best investigators to dig up everything about me, Rushue, and those 30 guards, down to my underwear, as he put it. In the south, things got more interesting. The Red Phoenix Hall's leader was a woman called Feng Yang, late 20s, dangerously beautiful, draped in a red dress with a slit that left very little to imagination. She lounged on her couch, blowing smoke rings while her maid confirmed the news. She laughed like a cat watching mice fight. Chun Wanjin's Salt and Iron Empire had made everyone jealous for years, and now a kid had taken him down. Then she asked whether I was handsome. Her maid stammered that the rumors said I was exceptionally good-looking. That got her attention. She sat up, ordered a generous gift prepared, and told her maid to deliver it to our manor with an invitation. She wanted to have tea with me. The maid worried it was too soon to pick sides. Feng Yang tapped her forehead and corrected her. This wasn't picking sides. This was investing. Any man who could devour the Black Tiger Gang overnight was either a madman or a dragon. Either way, he was worth meeting personally. And she certainly wasn't going to let the Eastern Madman or the Western Wolf swallow this prize before she got her share. 3 major powers, all suddenly very interested in me. The game in Blackwind City had just gotten a whole lot bigger. I carried Louis back to her room. That familiar orchid scent filled the air, faint but always there, always tugging at something inside me. I laid her gently on the bed and looked down at her. Her face was completely drained of color, pale as paper, fragile in a way that made my chest tight. On her neck, there was a thin red line where the blade had cut her. It had stopped bleeding, but seeing it felt like someone had carved that wound into me instead. I took out some medicine and dipped my finger into the cool ointment. I bent down and started applying it to the cut as carefully as I could. I barely breathed, afraid of hurting her. Her skin under my fingertip was impossibly smooth, nothing like touching her through fabric. But even with how gentle I was, the sting of the medicine on the open wound made her body flinch. Her eyelashes trembled violently, and then her eyes opened. At first they were hazy, confused, still lost somewhere between sleep and waking. Then the memory hit her. Pure terror flooded those beautiful eyes. She screamed and shot upright, arms crossed over her chest, scrambling backward until her back hit the wall. She looked like a deer that had just heard a gunshot, shaking, cornered, ready to bolt. I raised both hands immediately. "It's me. Don't be scared." My voice cut through the panic. She focused on my face, and recognition slowly replaced the fear. But what came after was worse in some ways. The kind of deep, trembling relief that comes after you realize you almost died. Her lip quivered, and then she threw herself at me, wrapping her arms around me so tight it almost hurt. I could feel her whole body shaking against mine. She cried. Not loud, not dramatic. Just quiet, muffled sounds pressed into my chest. The kind of crying that comes from someone who held it together through the worst of it and can finally let go. I patted her back softly and told her it was over. Everything was fine now. It took a long time for the shaking to stop. When she finally pulled back, her eyes were still wet, looking up at me through a thin fog of tears. What happened? The Chin family? Is second sister okay? Even after everything, her first thought was about everyone else. Her voice was still trembling, soft and fragile. I wiped the tears from the corner of her eye and smiled. I told her Chen Wanjin was a legless dog locked in our woodshed. Rushue was handling the cleanup with the guards. Everyone else was safe. She had nothing to worry about. She let out a long breath and collapsed against me like someone had pulled every bone from her body. She went completely limp in my arms, soft as a willow branch with all the strength drained out. Her clothes were already messed up from the struggle earlier, and as she melted into me, The collar of her white dress slipped open a few inches. I caught a glimpse of smooth skin and curves that I definitely was not supposed to see right now. My breath caught for a second, but I reached over and gently fixed her collar, pulling it back into place. My fingertip accidentally grazed her collarbone. We both froze. A pink flush crept across her cheeks. She leaned against me quietly for a while. Then she tilted her head, those gorgeous eyes blinking at me, and a familiar little smirk appeared at the corner of her mouth. "So you carried me back again." I recognized this script immediately. Same lines as last time. "What else was I supposed to do?" I said, playing my part. "You were knocked out cold. Should I have left you lying in the courtyard?" She laughed. There were still tear tracks on her face, but her smile bloomed like a flower breaking through storm clouds, washing away all the darkness. "Well then, since you were so thoughtful, I suppose I should reward you." My eyes instinctively dropped to her chest area. Last time she said this, she pulled out construction blueprints. If this woman whipped out work documents right now, after we just survived a gang war, I was going to lose my mind. But no blueprints appeared. Instead, she leaned in close. Before I could react, something warm and impossibly soft pressed against my lips. It carried the scent of orchids and the faintest taste of salt from her tears. My brain stopped working. Soft, sweet, warm. The kiss was light, barely there, gone almost as soon as it arrived. "Third sister, you." A slender finger pressed against my lips before I could finish. Her face had turned deep red, the blush spreading down her neck. She moved her mouth close to my ear, her breath like warm silk. "Don't call me third sister," she whispered. "Call me wife." Something inside my skull snapped clean in half. This woman was already dangerously attractive, just sitting still. Every tiny movement she made could steal half a man's soul. But this deliberate, whispered invitation was like pouring hot oil onto white-hot iron. I grabbed her by the waist and pressed her down onto the bed. She gasped, eyes wide with shock, staring up at me. She had only meant to tease me a little, to show her feelings after surviving together. She never expected to set off an eruption. "Wait, I was just playing around." Her voice had shrunk to almost nothing. All her business queen confidence evaporated. She was looking everywhere except at me. I leaned down until my breath was hot against her skin. "Don't call me Little 10, I said. "Call me husband." She shivered from head to toe, melting underneath me like snow in spring. Her eyes were swimming, lips parted, completely overwhelmed. "Be gentle," she whispered. The orchid fragrance in that room mixed with something far more primal, and the rest of the night belonged to us alone. The room still carried traces of heat from what had just happened. I was half lying on the bed with a thin blanket over me, my chest and shoulders exposed. Louie was kneeling beside me wearing nothing but a white silk nightgown, one strap sliding off her smooth shoulder. After what we had shared, her already stunning face was glowing with a deep rosy flush. Every glance she gave carried a kind of intoxicating charm that made it impossible to look away. She was like a flower that had just been kissed by rain, blooming with dangerous beauty. She was bent over my shoulder, dabbing medicine onto the wound from Chun Chong's sleeve pistol. The bullet had been dug out, but the hole it left behind still looked ugly and raw. The second the alcohol-soaked cloth touched the open flesh, fire raced through my nerves and I sucked air through my teeth, so hard my whole body locked up. "Watch it. Are you trying to murder your own husband? That hurts." She looked up with those glistening eyes, gave me an annoyed glare, but her cheeks betrayed her with a fresh wave of pink. She scolded me in that impossibly soft voice, saying it was my own fault for being so rough earlier when I was already injured. Now I wanted to complain about pain. I protested immediately. How was any of this my fault? She was the one who started it. She kissed me first. I was a healthy young man, and she was the most seductive woman alive. What exactly did she expect would happen? She raised her little fist to hit me, but then saw the bandage and stopped herself. Her mouth kept scolding, but her hands got even gentler. She finished wrapping the wound with clean gauze and tied a neat little knot. She sat up, ready to climb off the bed and put the supplies away, when her eyes caught something odd about the blanket. There was a suspicious little hill rising from the flat surface. She tilted her head, probably thinking the fabric was bunched up. Being the perfectionist she was, she reached out to smooth it down. The instant her hand made contact, I let out a strangled sound I could not contain. She froze. Then understanding hit her like a lightning bolt. Her face went nuclear red. She punched my chest, half furious and half mortified, demanding to know how I could possibly be ready again when I was literally wounded. Her voice was pure complaint, but the softness underneath made it the sweetest sound I had ever heard. I grabbed her wrist, flipped her onto the bed, and pinned her beneath me before she could escape. She yelped in surprise, eyes wide, realizing she had accidentally lit the fuse a second time. She stammered that I should slow down, be careful of the stitches, stop being so impatient. I leaned in close, my nose nearly touching hers, and told her that the first round had been too rushed. I had charged in like a soldier storming a fortress and barely tasted anything. Now I intended to take my time and savor every single detail of my beautiful wife. She went boneless, pushing weakly against my chest, whispering that I was terrible, that I should at least be careful with my shoulder. I told her I would survive and kissed her before she could argue further. A long while later, I lay there feeling like every cell in my body was singing with contentment. She was draped over me like a lazy cat, not moving a single muscle, her enchanting eyes half closed in a dreamy haze. Holding her warm body against mine, I truly understood what people meant by heavenly bliss. I pulled myself together and opened my system panel. A shining golden gift package was floating in my mind, labeled as Lu Yi's special reward. I opened it silently. The system announced I had received something called a Fun Variety Wardrobe. I stared at the name, completely confused. A wardrobe? Was this some kind of snack box to replenish energy after physical exercise? What was the system thinking? I examined the item in my mental space. It was an incredibly fancy wardrobe, all white with golden decorations carved into every surface. It could not be taken out of the system physically, but I could open its doors with a thought. When I looked inside, my jaw nearly hit the floor. It was not food. It was not equipment. It was rack after rack of costumes. Sailor uniforms. Bunny girl outfits with ears and fluffy tails. Nurse costumes. Cat ear sets. And in the drawers below, an absolute treasure trove of silk accessories in every possible style and color. Black, white, fishnet, lace straps. Everything a man with a creative imagination could ever dream of. My eye twitched violently. So that was what variety meant. The system was not a game master. It was an absolute degenerate mastermind that understood my deepest needs better than I understood them myself. I mentally reached for the most classic item, a pair of black silk stockings. The thought barely formed before they materialized in my hand. They were cool to the touch, impossibly smooth, thin as a butterfly wing, yet stretchy and strong. The quality was beyond anything this world could produce. That was when Lu Yi noticed what I was holding. She propped herself up lazily, her nightgown slipping even further down her shoulder, revealing more of her freshly glowing skin. She plucked the black silk from my fingers and ran them through her own hands, marveling at how smooth they felt. "What are these for?" she asked, looking up at me with those devastating innocent eyes. I looked at her perfect face, then at the weapon of mass destruction in her delicate fingers, and a magnificent plan formed in my head. I cleared my throat and put on my most serious scholarly expression. "You clearly do not recognize this," I began with grave authority. "This is an ancient divine artifact called the Absolute Territory Soul-Binding Stockings. Once worn, they cause all enemies within visual range to lose their minds completely, entering an uncontrollable frenzy of attack until they collapse from total exhaustion. It is an unstoppable weapon." She stared at me with the blankiest expression I had ever seen on a human face, two giant question marks practically floating above her head. Lu Yi stared at me with her head tilted, question marks practically floating above her. She had absolutely no idea what I was talking about. Absolute territory? Soul binding? These concepts did not exist in her world, and my deadpan delivery only made her more confused. I looked at her innocent, clueless expression and felt my smile grow wider. This was too perfect. "Don't worry if you don't understand," I said, keeping my voice smooth and authoritative. "Your husband will personally demonstrate." Before she could react, I took the black silk from her hands. My other hand found her leg, long, smooth, warm as jade. She flinched and tried to pull away, but I held firm and told her to stay still while I showed her how the ancient artifact worked. I slipped the opening over her delicate toes and began rolling it upward. Slowly, inch by inch, The thin black fabric climbed past her ankle, over her round calf, across her knee, and continued higher. The contrast between the deep black silk and her snow-white skin created something so visually devastating that my brain nearly short-circuited. The smooth, elastic texture under my fingertips made my hands tremble slightly. I had to remind myself to breathe. When the stocking was finally in place, perfectly hugging every curve of her leg, I sat back and tried to maintain my composure. She lifted her leg curiously, turning it in the candlelight to examine the effect. The thin black layer made her leg look like it was wrapped in liquid shadow, mysterious, elegant, and absolutely lethal. "It doesn't feel that special," she said, blinking those big innocent eyes at me, completely unaware that she had just become the most dangerous weapon in the known universe. Without the stockings, I could resist her through sheer willpower. Barely. But this version of her, black silk clinging to those perfect legs, looking up at me with that mixture of purity and natural seduction, was beyond anything my self-control could handle. I let out something between a growl and a howl and launched myself at her like a starving wolf. She squealed, but there was no escape. The ancient artifact had claimed its first victim, and that victim was absolutely me. The next morning, the sun was already high when I finally woke up. My body felt like I had run a marathon while carrying a boulder on my back. My lower back was a little sore. Just a little. Maybe more than a little. I shifted slightly and felt her warm softness pressed against me. Louis was tangled around me like a vine, sleeping deeply. Her face, already capable of toppling kingdoms on a normal day, now radiated an almost supernatural glow after being thoroughly loved. Every inch of her skin looked dewy and luminous. Her slightly swollen red lips curved upward even in sleep, begging to be kissed. I leaned down and stole a quick peck. Her lashes fluttered, and she opened her eyes. The moment she saw me, a sweet smile bloomed across her face, and she stretched up to kiss me back. "Good morning, husband." Those two words in her sleepy, husky voice nearly undid me all over again. I cleared my throat and asked how my performance had been last night. Was the ancient artifact powerful enough? The second I mentioned it, memories of last night flooded her face with crimson. She remembered everything. The stockings still on her legs, the madness that followed. "This is all your fault," she cried, punching my chest lightly. "What enemy loses their mind? You were the one who went crazy." "Big liar." I grinned shamelessly and pointed out that it was hardly my fault she looked that devastating in them. Besides, who was the one clinging to me last night, crying out for more? She bit my shoulder in retaliation, leaving a very visible teeth mark, and declared she was never speaking to me again. We both knew that would last about 30 seconds. Right on cue, heavy knocking exploded against the bedroom door. "Linimo, third sister, are you awake?" Something huge happened. It was Rushue's voice, sounding urgent but also strangely excited. Louis nearly jumped out of her skin. She scrambled off me and started frantically searching for clothes to throw on. I stayed calm, called out that the door was open, and asked what was so urgent. Rushua burst in like a tornado. Her gorgeous face lit up with shock and wild joy. She locked eyes with me and started talking at machine gun speed, so excited her voice was shaking. "We might have just hit the jackpot?" I was confused. Hit the jackpot how? Did she find money on the street? Then she noticed the state of the room. The wrecked bed. The lingering scent in the air. Louis desperately trying to dress herself with a face red enough to cook eggs on. And me sitting there shirtless with a bandaged shoulder. Even Rushua, who could be dense about these things, connected the dots instantly. "You too." "You." Louis wanted to melt into the floor. She stammered something about explaining. I stood up, completely unbothered, and said there was nothing to explain. A man sleeping with his own wife was perfectly natural and required zero justification. Louis's face somehow got even redder. Rushua's expression tightened for a second, a flash of jealousy she could not quite hide, but she recovered with trademark stubbornness. "Who cares about you two sleeping together? It's not like I haven't had a taste myself." I stumbled so hard I almost face-planted. Had a taste? What kind of savage words were these? Right in front of Louis? Was this woman insane? I felt Louis's gaze drilling into my back like two needles. Her quiet voice drifted from behind me, asking Rushua exactly what she meant by taste. Disaster incoming. I coughed violently and loudly, physically dragging the conversation back to safe ground. Talk about the important thing, I begged. The actual news. Rushua shot me a victorious smirk, clearly pleased with the chaos she had caused, then finally got to the point. Chen Wanjin's mansion. I found a massive secret. That got my attention. I stopped mid-button. She told me she had taken a team to search Chen Wanjin's estate. In his bedroom, behind a hidden panel, she discovered a tunnel leading underground. At the bottom was a treasure vault packed floor to ceiling with gold, silver, and precious goods. Mountains of wealth, she said. Literal mountains. Lu Yi and I looked at each other. We both saw the same shock and excitement reflected back. They found the vault. The second I heard, treasure vault, every ache in my body vanished. My back stopped hurting, my legs felt brand new, and I was pretty sure I could fight another war right then and there. I threw on clothes in 3 seconds flat and told Rushua to lead the way. The three of us raced to the Chun family mansion. Our guards had already taken control of the whole estate. People were everywhere, sorting through rooms and hauling out supplies. Rushua guided us straight to Chun Wanjin's bedroom, which was completely trashed. A heavy bookshelf had been knocked over against the wall, revealing a pitch-black hole behind it. She pointed at the entrance with obvious pride. She told me she had felt something was off about that bookshelf, kicked it over, and discovered the secret passage. I gave her a thumbs up and told her I loved her treasure hunting style. Simple, violent, and effective. I grabbed a torch from one of the guards and went in first. Stone steps led downward, slippery and damp. The air smelled like dust mixed with old copper coins. After about 50 steps, the passage opened up into a massive underground chamber. What I saw made me gasp out loud, and I am not a man who gasps easily. The space was roughly half the size of a basketball court, and it was filled with treasure. On the left side, gold bars were stacked into a small mountain that hurt to look at directly. On the right, rows and rows of neatly organized wooden crates were lined up. Several had been cracked open, revealing perfectly white silver ingots packed inside. In the center of the room sat dozens more large chests that nobody had opened yet. Rushua ran to one of the center chests and flipped the lid. Gems, pearls, and polished stones spilled into view, catching the torchlight and scattering it into 1,000 colors. Some of the rubies were the size of pigeon eggs. Any single one of them could feed an ordinary family for a lifetime. Rushua was practically vibrating with excitement. Her eyes burned with a feverish light as she announced that with this money, she could expand our guards to 1,000 men. No, 5,000. She wanted to buy the best war horses, forge the sharpest swords, and build the heaviest armor. She wanted to make sure nobody would ever dare threaten our manor again. She was not looking at gold. She was seeing an army. Lu Yi was equally stunned, but her brain switched into business mode within seconds. Her merchant instincts kicked in hard and fast. She told Rushua that we could not just spend all this money, or it would eventually run dry. We needed to use a portion as startup capital. Open a money-lending house in the city to collect idle funds from the population. Take over Chun Wanjin's entire salt and iron operation. Make money work for us, generating profit that multiplied endlessly. Rushua blinked at her in confusion. Money could make more money? Lu Yi smiled with supreme confidence and told her that fighting was Rushua's specialty, but business was hers. Within minutes, Lu Yi had people bringing in account books, ink, brushes, and an abacus. A desk and chair appeared in the underground vault. She sat down and started writing at terrifying speed, cataloging everything. She barked instructions at Rushua to organize the counting teams. Rushua threw herself into the work with her usual intensity, rolling up her sleeves and yelling at the top of her lungs as she directed the guards through the inventory. Gold bars, 50 per crate, 50 ounces each. Silver ingots, 500 per sack. Someone weigh them. One of the guards found a glowing pearl the size of a fist, and Rushua squealed with delight. The two of them worked together like a perfectly oiled machine. One commanded, the other calculated. The sound of clinking metal and Rushua's booming voice filled the vault. And me? I stood in the corner like a decorative plant. I tried to help. I really did. But when it came to military planning, Rushua was light years ahead of me. When it came to finance, Lu Yi might as well have been my ancestor. I was completely useless in this situation, a mascot with no function whatsoever. I suggested maybe we should take a break, get some breakfast, since none of us had eaten anything all morning. Both women snapped, No, without even looking up, perfectly synchronized in their rejection. I rubbed my nose awkwardly. Fine then. I told them their humble servant would excuse himself while the two bosses continued their important work. Neither of them acknowledged my departure. I slipped out of the Chun mansion feeling like a discarded accessory. But I had my own business to handle. I walked back to our manor and headed to the storage shed in the back courtyard. The moment I pushed open the door, the stench of blood hit me in the face like a fist. Chen Wanjin was tied up on a pile of straw like a broken dog. Both legs were severed at the knees, wrapped in dirty rags soaked through with dark blood. The straw underneath him was stained brown and red. He heard the door creak and struggled to lift his head. When he recognized me, pure hatred exploded across his face. He screamed my name and thrashed on the ground, trying to lunge at me, but only managing to flop around pitifully. He called me an animal. He screamed about his dead son, his severed legs. He swore my whole family would pay. I watched him rage until he ran out of breath. Then I crouched down beside him and spoke quietly. I told him he had it backwards. I was not the one who killed his son. He killed his own son. If he had not sent armed thugs to threaten my salt field, his boy would still be alive and drinking in some pleasure house. If he had not tried to slaughter my family and use my people as hostages, I would never have thrown his son off a wall. Every word landed like a needle in his most painful spot. His screaming stopped dead. He knew I was right, even if his hatred refused to let him admit it. He told me to stop wasting words. Kill him or cut him up however I wanted. Whatever I was trying to get from him, he would never give it. He had figured out that I kept him alive because I needed something, and he had decided that whatever it was, he would rather die than hand it over. He wanted me to fail. He wanted me to live with the frustration of getting nothing from him. I looked at his defiant, hateful eyes and smiled. I ignored Chun Wanjin's screaming and calmly dragged the broken table and chair in front of him. I set out paper, ink, and a brush, nice and neat. Then I grabbed him by the collar and dropped him onto the chair. The impact on his severed legs made him shudder with pain, but his cloudy eyes stayed locked on me, full of confusion and suspicion. I tapped the blank paper with one finger and told him to write a transfer contract for his salt license. He would state that Chun Wanjin voluntarily and unconditionally transferred all salt trading rights in Black Wind City to Lin Mo. Once he finished writing, he could leave alive. The moment I said, salt license, his face went through a wild transformation. First shock, then something clicking behind his eyes, and finally an explosion of insane laughter. He threw his head back and howled until tears and snot streamed down his face. His body convulsed against the table so hard that his leg wounds tore open again, fresh blood soaking through the dirty bandages. He screamed that he finally understood everything. We did not have a salt license. Without one, every grain of salt our field produced was worthless white dirt. If we dared sell even a single ounce, the government would raid our home and wipe out our entire family. He laughed and laughed, thrilled that he had found our fatal weakness. He told me to kill him right now. He was absolutely certain I would not dare, because the second he died, the location of his salt and iron licenses would die with him. He wanted me to kneel. He wanted me to beg. He wanted to drag me down into ruin alongside him as his final act of revenge. He sat there with his chin raised high, looking like a martyr ready for death, completely convinced he had won. I looked at him and smiled. Not an angry smile or a frustrated one, just a calm, quiet smile that seemed to unsettle him more than any threat could have. I said one word, "Fine." Then I told him I would send him on his way. Between my fingers, a small piece of paper appeared from thin air. It shimmered with a faint golden light, as if liquid gold was flowing through its surface. The talisman caught fire on its own, without wind or flame, and dissolved into a thin wisp of blue smoke. That smoke shot straight into the space between Chun Wanjin's eyebrows and vanished. He was still sneering, mocking me for trying to scare him with supernatural tricks. He boasted that he had seen everything in his life, and some parlor magic was not going to change his mind. I ignored his noise completely. I looked directly into his eyes and spoke clearly, one word at a time. Tell me where the salt license and the iron license are. What happened next was deeply unsettling, even for me. His sneer froze on his face like someone had pressed pause on his entire body. The hatred and madness in his eyes started flickering violently, as though two forces were battling for control inside his skull. His body began shaking uncontrollably. His teeth chattered so hard I could hear them grinding. Sweat poured down his face in rivers. Then the struggle faded. His eyes went empty, hollow, like someone had reached inside his head and pulled out every emotion, every thought, every shred of willpower. What was left was a shell, a puppet with no strings. His voice came out dry and mechanical, completely devoid of the fury that had been burning in it seconds ago. My salt license and iron license are in the Chun family ancestral hall, behind the plaque that reads, "Wealth flows in." My personal seal is on the third shelf of the bookcase, inside a black wooden box. He spilled everything. Every last secret he had sworn to take to his grave, spoken in a flat monotone like he was reading from a shopping list. I smiled with deep satisfaction. I stood up and pushed the paper and brush in front of him. I told him to write transfer contracts for the salt and iron licenses, plus every piece of property, every shop, and every business registered under his name. Write it all. Then stamp each page with his thumbprint. He picked up the brush without a moment of hesitation. He dipped it in ink and began writing in careful, neat strokes, page after page after page. His hand moved steadily, mechanically, filling document after document with the precise legal language needed to sign away his entire empire. After what felt like a very long time, Chen Wanjin suddenly jolted. His blank eyes snapped back into focus. He looked around the room in confusion, then down at the table. A thick stack of papers covered in his own handwriting stared back at him. Every page bore his bright red thumbprint. Transfer contracts, property deeds, business agreements, all signed, all sealed, all handing everything he owned to me. The color drained from his face so fast I thought he might faint. "What did you do to me?" he whispered, his voice cracking with horror. I picked up the stack of documents, blew gently on the wet ink, and tucked the whole bundle inside my robe. Then I crouched down, patted his cheek, and told him that next time, he should try being less stubborn. One sharp twist, a clean snap. He slumped forward and went still. Walking out of that shed, I felt deeply content. Salt license, iron license, every property, every business, all mine now. And I had zero intention of managing any of it myself. That was what Lu Yi was for. Picturing her commanding a commercial empire while looking impossibly beautiful made me grin like an idiot. I headed toward the Chun family ancestral hall to collect the actual licenses, but I barely made it a few steps before a massive explosion rocked the entire manor from the back courtyard. My smile vanished instantly. My body moved before my brain caught up, sprinting toward the sound. The closer I got, the stronger the burnt chemical smell became. The blast had come from a small courtyard called Curiosity Pavilion, where my fourth and fifth sisters-in-law lived. Half the roof was gone. Walls were scorched black. Strange metal parts and shattered wood covered the ground, while thick smoke billowed from the wreckage. My heart was hammering when a pile of burnt debris shifted and a small figure crawled out. She was covered head to toe in ash and soot, her hair standing straight up in every direction like a bird's nest that had been struck by lightning. Her face was completely black except for two enormous eyes that gleamed with alarming brightness. Those eyes held zero fear. Instead, they sparkled with the unmistakable excitement of someone whose experiment had just worked. It was fourth sister-in-law, Gulinger. She spotted me standing frozen at the gate. Her bright eyes blinked twice. Then the excitement drained away at remarkable speed. Her lower lip pushed out into a perfect pout, and her eyes filled with tears faster than I thought physically possible. "Little brother-in-law," she said in the sweetest, most pitiful voice imaginable, dragging out every syllable. I did not do it on purpose. It just exploded by itself. I stood there with my brain completely offline, trying to process what exactly I was looking at. Before I could even process what I was looking at, Su Qingwei and the other sisters-in-law came rushing over. When they saw the destroyed courtyard and the soot-covered creature standing in the middle of it, every face went white with shock. Su Qingwei was the first to reach Gulinger, grabbing her and checking every inch of her body for injuries. She scolded her with a voice full of worry, saying she had told her 1,000 times not to play with dangerous things at home. Gulinger dove straight into Su Qingyue's arms and smeared black ash all over her clean clothes without a care in the world. But instead of looking sorry, she puffed up her chest and started defending herself. She insisted it was not her fault this time. Her Thunderfire Bomb had a mind of its own and decided to explode ahead of schedule. She told it to wait, but it refused to listen. She spoke about the explosive device like it was a disobedient pet rather than something that had just blown the roof off her house. I stood at the gate with my temple throbbing. Thunderfire bomb. She had been building bombs. In our home, where people lived and slept and ate breakfast. This tiny girl had been manufacturing explosives in a residential courtyard like it was a perfectly normal hobby. Then a second voice came running in, soft and sweet, and trembling on the edge of tears. It was fifth sister-in-law, Gu Minjer, bursting through the gate clutching a little paper package to her chest. She and Gu Linger were twin sisters, both 18 years old. They shared the exact same delicate doll-like face, the same impossibly mature figure that seemed to contradict their innocent features completely. But their personalities could not have been more different. Gu Linger was a firecracker wrapped in candy paper. Gu Minjer was a soft pudding served in a porcelain bowl. Where one sister could blow up buildings, the other could barely finish a sentence without blushing. Gu Minjer was wearing a pale yellow dress with her hair done up in 2 cute buns. She had gone out early to a famous bakery in the South District to buy pastries. She came home to find her sister's workshop turned into a crater. The second she saw the blackened figure standing in the rubble, her eyes turned red and she threw herself at her twin, crying that she thought the worst had happened. Gu Linger instantly transformed into the responsible older sister. She straightened her back, patted her soot-covered hand on Minjer's clean hair, and declared that everything was under control. Just a minor miscalculation. The Thunderfire bomb performed slightly above expectations. Small matter. Nothing to worry about. I watched this scene unfold and marveled at the contrast. Same face, same body, completely different operating systems. One was a battlefield engineer, the other was a baby rabbit made of cotton candy. Hard to believe they came from the same womb. Once Minjer confirmed her sister was unharmed, she finally noticed me standing at the entrance. Our eyes met, and her face instantly turned the color of a ripe tomato. She quickly separated from her sister, smoothed down her rumpled skirt with nervous hands, and shuffled over to me with tiny steps. She curtsied politely, her voice small and timid, apologizing on behalf of her sister for causing trouble and making a mess. Looking at this shy little creature who could barely make eye contact, I felt genuinely amused. One twin could punch a hole in the sky. The other struggled to talk to people. Life really had a sense of humor. I smiled warmly and told her not to worry about it. Nobody got hurt, and walls could always be rebuilt. Then I looked past her toward the still-smoking ruins and asked Gu Linger directly what her Thunderfire bomb actually was and why it packed such enormous power. That question was like flipping a switch. Her eyes exploded with starlight. She abandoned all pretense of guilt and charged at me, launching into a passionate lecture about her invention. She explained how she had purified the saltpeter, added 3 different boosting agents, and compressed everything into iron molds. The principle was instantaneous energy release, creating massive shockwaves and extreme heat. She made a big expanding gesture with her hands and yelled the sound effect out loud. She told me this explosion was just an accident. Her real goal was precise control over blast radius and destructive power. She had already named different versions of her creations. A long-range model called Flying Fire Meteor Enhanced Edition. A siege weapon called Immovable King Ultimate Edition designed to blow open city gates. And something she was still designing called Buddha's Wrath Fire Lotus Premium Edition. My eye was twitching uncontrollably, but my brain was racing even faster. This was not just a girl playing with firecrackers. This was a weapons engineer. If her inventions could be refined and deployed on an actual battlefield, the military applications would be absolutely terrifying. I found myself getting genuinely excited listening to her technical explanations. We were deep in what felt like an academic conference on explosives when a pale hand reached in and grabbed Gu Linger's ear with surgical precision. Su Qinghua had reached her limit. The gentle, elegant first wife was standing there with her eyebrows practically touching the sky, fury radiating from every pore. She dragged Gu Linger away by the ear while the girl howled about the pain and begged to stay, desperately shouting over her shoulder that she had not finished telling me about her 10,000 Buddhas ascending to heaven project. The other sisters-in-law followed, clucking about how dangerous her experiments were, how she had already blown up the kitchen once before, and how she kept scaring poor Minjer half to death. Within seconds, the ruined courtyard was empty and silent. Just me and Gu Minjer, standing alone in the smoke-tinged air. The moment she realized we were by ourselves, her face caught fire again. Her heart was practically visible through her chest, beating like a trapped rabbit. She looked down at the paper package she had been protecting through all the chaos. Then, with the desperate courage of someone jumping off a cliff, she shoved it into my hands. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. She told me it was from the best bakery in town, their new osmanthus flour sugar cake, and that it was really delicious. Before I could say a single word, she grabbed her skirt, spun around, and sprinted away after her sisters like a wisp of shy smoke vanishing around the corner. I looked down at the little package still warm from her body heat and shook my head with a smile. I untied the string and opened it. Inside were several delicate cakes shaped like plum blossoms, dusted with dried osmanthus flowers, giving off a gentle sweetness that was not overpowering. I popped one into my mouth. It melted instantly. Soft, sticky rice and fragrant osmanthus bloomed across my tongue together. When I woke up from my nap on Louis's couch, the smell of dinner had pulled me out of sleep. But the moment I stepped through the door, I saw her sitting at the table with her shoulders shaking violently. In her trembling hands was a piece of paper, soaked through with tears. All the sleep drained out of me in an instant. I walked over and looked at the woman who normally teased me with playful smiles and clever words. The woman who ran a construction site like a general and negotiated prices like a shark. That woman was crying like a child who had been thrown away by the entire world. I asked her what happened. She lifted her face, streaked with tears, and gave me the most broken smile I had ever seen. "Am I useless?" she whispered. I did not answer. I just reached over and gently pulled the letter from her fingers. It was from the Liu family. Her family. The paper was expensive, the kind only wealthy people in the capital used. But the words written on it were the cheapest, cruelest things I had ever read. No mention of the salt license. No warmth. No greeting. Just 4 cold lines telling her to never bring up the salt license again. That she had no connection to the Liu family anymore, and to stop writing letters. It was not even signed with a name. Just the Liu family. Like she was not worth the effort of a personal signature from her own father. A cold fury flickered deep inside me. Not for myself. For her. She told me everything then, though I could piece most of it together already. Growing up, she had always been smarter than her brothers. She could read 1,000 characters at 3, manage household accounts at 7, and offer brilliant business ideas at 10. But every time she showed her talent, her father and brothers just patted her head and told her she was clever for a girl, but girls did not need to understand business. Her only job was to look pretty and marry well. That was her contribution to the Liu family. They took her ideas, used them to make money, and gave all the credit to her brothers. She was always the flower vase locked in the back rooms, never allowed to step into the world she was born to conquer. So when her father offered her a deal, marry into the powerful Lin family, and he would grant her one wish, she grabbed it with both hands. She planned to use that wish to open her own trading company in the capital. The jade pendant was her proof of the agreement. She had gambled her entire future on that promise. She thought it was a test. She thought her father was finally recognizing her ability. It was all a lie. From the very beginning, she was nothing but merchandise. A beautiful, breathing piece of goods to be traded for political advantage. When the Lin family was powerful, she was a useful bargaining chip. When we were exiled and ruined, she became a liability to be discarded immediately. The promise, the jade pendant, the wish, all worthless. In the Liu family's giant ledger of profit and loss, their own daughter did not even rate a footnote. She laughed through her tears, a sound so hollow it made my chest ache. She said everything she had been proud of, her business mind, her ambitions, her dreams, had turned out to be one enormous joke. She had always believed she could prove her worth. But in the end, she never had anything at all. I looked at her, at those beautiful eyes drowning in pain, and I made a decision. I took the letter and tore it apart. Slowly, deliberately, right in front of her face. I ripped it into pieces no bigger than fingernails and let them fall like snow between us. She stopped crying and stared at me, stunned. I told her it was garbage. Nothing worth crying over. Wasting tears on people who did not deserve them was a waste of perfectly good emotions. Then I reached into my robe and pulled out a thick stack of documents. I dropped them on the table in front of her with a solid thump. The first page on top bore the bright red official seal of the government. Her eyes locked onto it, and her pupils shrank to pinpoints. It was the salt license. Before she could even process that, I slid it aside to reveal the second document underneath. The iron license. Her breathing nearly stopped. If the salt license was a key to a fortune, the iron license was the foundation of an empire. Both had been Chen Wanjin's most guarded possessions. Both were now mine. But I was not finished. From the same stack, I pulled out sheet after sheet. Land deeds, property titles, business transfer papers, salt fields, iron mines, money-lending houses, pawn shops, restaurants, fabric stores, nearly every business in the entire North District of Blackwind City. Each one signed by Chen Wanjin himself, stamped with his thumbprint, transferring full ownership to me. Louis's mind had completely shut down. Her heart was pounding so hard I could practically hear it bouncing off the walls. She looked like someone who had been drowning and suddenly found solid ground under her feet. I gathered all the documents together and pushed the entire pile across the table to her. I told her that from today, everything that used to belong to the Chun family now belonged to the Lin family. And all of it was hers to manage. However she wanted to run things, whatever she wanted to build, I would back her completely. Open banks, create monopolies, take over the entire city's economy. I did not care. Her dream was my priority. Then I said the words I knew she needed to hear more than anything else in her life. The Liu family would not give you a chance. I will. They did not want you. I do. Something exploded behind her eyes. Not sadness this time. Something bright and fierce and uncontainable. Every wall she had built around herself, every careful layer of composure and calculation, crumbled to dust in that single moment. She launched herself into my arms so hard I almost fell over. Then her lips crashed into mine, wet with tears, desperate and clumsy and burning with everything she had kept locked inside for years. She held on to me like I was the only solid thing left in her universe, squeezing so tight I thought she might actually try to merge into my body. I tried to suggest we eat dinner first since I was starving and running on empty. She cut me off before I could finish the sentence. Her voice was muffled against my chest, fierce and absolute. I don't want dinner. I want you. After everything calmed down, Louis lay curled up against me like a satisfied cat. Her silk nightgown had not survived our earlier activities and was scattered somewhere across the room in pieces. She pressed her bare body against mine without any shyness left, sharing warmth and heartbeats. Even though her body was completely content, she would not let go of me. In the span of one evening, she had gone from the absolute bottom of despair to being held in my arms like the most precious thing in the world. I think she finally felt like she had found where she belonged. She whispered my name in that husky, rain-soaked voice that could make a man's bones dissolve. I stroked her smooth back gently while she talked. She told me that her whole life, she had been trying to prove herself to the Liu family. She wanted to show them she was smarter than all her brothers combined. She wanted them to see that her value went far beyond her face and her body. But now, she said, she did not care about proving anything to them anymore. I asked her why. She lifted her head and looked at me with those flower-petal eyes, still glistening from earlier tears, but now burning with something fierce and bright, like they contained an entire galaxy. Because you can see me, she said. My ambition, my frustration, my ability. You see all of it. And you are willing to be crazy alongside me. That is enough. She kissed my chest softly, with a tenderness that felt almost sacred, and told me that from now on, her ambition would burn for me alone. She would build a business empire so strong that nobody could ever take it away or break it apart. She asked if that was okay. Looking at the stars in her eyes, my heart swelled. I kissed her forehead and called her my money goddess. She pouted and told me to call her wife instead. So I did. Once she settled back into my arms, I quietly slipped into my system. Louis's portrait in the beauty collection had transformed completely. The once static gray image was now a dazzling animated scroll of pure gold and color. The picture showed a breathtaking woman in a luxurious golden robe, barefoot, lounging lazily on top of a mountain made entirely of gold, silver, and jewels. She was toying with a jade scepter between her elegant fingers, her seductive eyes half closed with casual power. Behind her, a massive golden money tree swayed without wind, showering the scene with an endless rain of gold coins. The face was unmistakably Lu Yi. Her stats had both hit maximum. Beauty score 100 out of 100, titled Calamity of the Age. Intimacy 100 out of 100, titled Exclusive Enchantress. Both descriptions fit her perfectly. Her allure really could bring kingdoms to their knees, and after last night, the exclusive part was certainly accurate. Her talent, Crystal Heart, was still locked. The activation condition remained the same impossible task. Get Lu Yi to willingly wash my feet and say, "Husband, is the water temperature comfortable?" The reward would be glazed eyes, the ability to see through all things, perceive fortune's flow, and pierce any illusion. Absolutely game-changing, but the task still seemed suicidal. Then the golden money tree on the scroll blazed with light. Two shining gift packages formed at its branches and floated down with musical chimes. I opened both immediately. The first reward was called the Harmony Mirror. It came as a pair. Whoever held the main mirror could see and hear everything happening around the secondary mirror, regardless of distance or obstacles. Basically a remote surveillance system. My mind started racing with possibilities. Give it to Lu Yi, and she could monitor every shop in the city from our manor. Give it to Rushue, and she could coordinate guards on missions in real time. Or I could use it to watch my sisters-in-law while they were bathing. No, absolutely not. Bad thought. Very bad. I was a respectable man with healthy boundaries. Mostly. The second reward was even more exciting. A Thousand Faces Mask. A one-time use item that could perfectly copy the appearance, voice, body shape, and even clothing of anyone I had personally seen before. The disguise lasted 1 hour. The strategic value was enormous. I could infiltrate enemy territory by turning into one of their own people. I could impersonate a rival and destroy their reputation from the inside. I could even turn into Gulinger and steal her twin sister's hidden snacks, then watch the chaos unfold when Minger blamed the wrong sister. Or I could transform into Lu Yi and invite all the other sisters-in-law to a hot spring trip together. Then when everyone was relaxed and comfortable, I would just happen to be there observing the beautiful scenery from a very convenient angle. I was grinning like an absolute idiot when a soft laugh broke through my fantasies. Lu Yi poked my cheek with her cool finger and asked what I was smiling about so stupidly. She pointed out that I was practically drooling and accused me of planning something terrible again. I wiped my mouth hastily and denied everything. But my attention drifted back to the one remaining challenge. The Crystal Heart talent and its absurd activation requirement. The Glazed Eyes ability was too powerful to ignore. I needed it. The problem was the method. Even with intimacy maxed out and Lu Yi completely devoted to me, she was still a proud woman at her core. A former noble daughter, a business genius, a future commercial queen. Asking her to kneel down and wash my feet carried a weight that went beyond the physical act. It was a symbol of submission, of total surrender, and that clashed with everything she was. I started running through scripts in my head. Should I just ask directly? "Honey, wash my feet, please." Too blunt. She would see through it instantly. Should I hint at it? "My feet are so tired from walking today." Too obvious. Her razor-sharp mind would catch the manipulation before I finished the sentence. I was still spinning through increasingly desperate plans when she stirred in my arms. She nuzzled deeper into my chest like a sleepy kitten, finding a warmer spot. Then, in that impossibly soft, mumbling voice, half asleep and utterly disarming, she whispered something that made my entire brain freeze solid. "Husband, do you want me to wash your feet?" When she asked me that question out of nowhere, my entire body went stiff. How could she possibly know about the foot washing thing? I stared down at her in pure shock and asked how she came up with that. She laughed at my face and poked my chest with her finger, those bewitching eyes dancing with mischief. She asked if she had guessed right and whether I was feeling guilty about it. After a pause, she pressed her cheek back against my chest and quietly explained something incredible. Ever since we had truly become husband and wife, she could faintly sense my thoughts. Not clearly, more like reflections on water, flickering and vague, but definitely real. She gave an example from the treasure vault earlier that day. When Rushue had the guards moving gold bars, one of them was shouting to be careful while his mind was screaming with greed. She caught that flash of hidden desire for just an instant, but she caught it nonetheless. And with me, she said, the connection was strongest. My feelings and intentions came through clearest of all. My mind raced. This had to be connected to the Dragon Phoenix harmony technique. Somehow our bond had awakened a kind of empathic ability in her. I decided to test the range. I looked into her eyes and concentrated with everything I had, mentally screaming one thought over and over about putting her in white stockings. She closed her eyes, focused for a moment, then shook her head. Too blurry, she said. Could not grab onto it. But she added with a wrinkled nose that whatever I was thinking felt kind of stupid. I exhaled with massive relief. The connection was not precise and definitely not running around the clock. Thank goodness. If she could read my mind in full detail at all times, I would die of embarrassment within a week. The things that passed through my head on any given afternoon would end multiple marriages. She pinched my waist and demanded I stop dodging her question. Did I want her to wash my feet or not? Those all-seeing eyes were locked onto mine, and I knew lying was pointless. I nodded and started to explain that the whole situation was complicated, but she cut me off before I could build any excuses. She said it was nothing to feel awkward about. I had given her a mountain of gold. I had picked up her shattered dream and placed it back in her hands. Her ambition, her pride, everything she was, it all belonged to me now. Washing my feet was the smallest thing in the world compared to what I had given her. She sat up with smooth confidence, wrapped herself in a silk robe, and told me to wait. She said if I wanted it, she would wash my feet every single day from now on. Then she walked out to order hot water from the maids. Minutes later, a steaming wooden basin was brought in. She dismissed the servants and knelt down beside it herself, dipping her delicate hands into the water to test the temperature. In the warm candlelight, her profile was so beautiful and so focused that the image burned itself permanently into my memory. This woman who commanded construction crews and slashed supplier prices without blinking was now adjusting bathwater for my feet with the tender care of the gentlest wife imaginable. I sat on the edge of the bed watching her, and something hot and overwhelming rose in my chest. I could not name the emotion exactly. It was bigger than gratitude, deeper than affection, and fiercer than anything I had felt before. She looked up at me with a playful wink and asked what I was waiting for. She told me to put my feet in. She was kneeling there, that nation-toppling face tilted upward, her soft hands already reaching for my ankles. Those same hands that calculated fortunes and signed contracts worth thousands now gently guided my feet into the warm water. The heat wrapped around my skin instantly, washing away tension I did not even know I was carrying. Her fingers began working through the water, kneading and pressing with perfect pressure. When her fingertips traced across the sole of my foot, a tingling sensation shot straight up my spine and into my scalp. My breathing went ragged without my permission. She noticed and smiled wider, clearly enjoying the effect she was having. Her nimble fingers worked across every inch, pressing, rubbing, squeezing between my toes, while steam rose around her face and made those flower petal eyes shimmer like they were filled with liquid light. Then she scooped warm water in her palm and poured it slowly over the top of my foot. Her voice came out soft as silk, sweet as honey. "How is it, my dear husband? Is the water temperature comfortable?" The system exploded in my head. Mission complete. Louis' exclusive talent unlocked. The glazed eyes were mine. I blinked instinctively, and the entire world transformed. Everything looked the same on the surface, but now I could see beneath it. The wooden basin displayed floating text telling me its age, condition, and that it contained trace amounts of calming wood essence. I looked at the bed, and the system helpfully informed me it was a 10-year-old golden silk Nanmu frame that had once been extremely sturdy until a certain person named Lin Mo got his hands on it. Very funny, system. I turned my gaze to Lu Yi. A magnificent golden aura swirled around her body like a warm ocean of light. The system described her state as fully devoted, emotionally bonded, possessing absolute loyalty to me. I checked my own hand next. My vitality was strong, spiritual energy slightly depleted, and the Dragon Phoenix technique was slowly circulating through my body. This was the glazed eyes, seeing through all things, reading the truth beneath every surface. The power was absolutely insane. But after barely 10 seconds, a crushing wave of dizziness slammed into my brain. All the information streams vanished, and the world snapped back to normal. The ability was devastatingly powerful, but consumed enormous mental energy. I could not use it carelessly. Still, my heart was pounding with excitement. Her voice pulled me back to earth. She was drying my feet with a soft cloth, handling each toe with impossible gentleness, asking why I was spacing out. I looked at her kneeling there, warm and obedient and beautiful beyond reason, and felt love and possessiveness surge through me like a tidal wave. A wicked grin spread across my face. Without warning, I scooped her up in both arms. She yelped and grabbed my neck. Then I set her down beside me and pressed her still-stockinged feet into the basin alongside mine. Water splashed everywhere. She squealed and protested, her face flushing crimson. The warm water soaked through her thin silk stockings, clinging to her perfect little feet. In the small basin, her toes bumped against mine. Her feet were tiny, cool, and soft as jade. Mine were large and warm and rough. She buried her burning face in my shoulder, too embarrassed to look up. "You are the worst," she whispered. I woke up the next morning feeling fantastic. Reached over to the other side of the bed and found it empty. Louis was already gone. When I walked out to the main room, breakfast was waiting on the table, warm millet porridge and crystal shrimp dumplings, still steaming. A note sat beside the food. She wrote that the Chun family's business empire was a massive mess that needed immediate attention. Salt fields, iron mines, dozens of shops, all requiring reorganization. She called herself this Empress and said she was heading out to conquer my commercial kingdom on my behalf. She ordered me to eat breakfast and not skip it. Then she added that my performance last night was barely passing and that she would be testing me again tonight. She signed it, "Your money goddess, Louis." I stared at the note, half laughing, half speechless. Yesterday this woman was sobbing in my arms like her world had ended. One night later, she was calling herself an empress and grading my bedroom skills. The version of Louis that had been fully unlocked was wilder and bolder than I ever expected. And honestly, I kind of loved it. After finishing my sponsored breakfast, I thought about what to do with my day. Su Qinghue was resting for the baby. Rushue was drilling the guards. Louis was out making money. I was the idle husband with nothing on his schedule again. Then yesterday's explosion flashed through my mind. That thunderfire bomb. And the girl who made it, fourth sister-in-law Gulinger. If her inventions could be controlled and improved, the military value would be enormous. I decided to pay her a visit and see what the human TNT was up to today. I heard the hammering before I even reached the courtyard. When I arrived at Curiosity Pavilion, I was genuinely surprised. The rubble from yesterday's blast had been almost entirely cleared. More than a dozen beefy craftsmen were working at full speed to rebuild the place, and their commander was Gulinger herself. She had changed into a practical black outfit with her hair tied up in a tight bun, a few smudges of ash still decorating her cheeks. She stood on top of a large rock with her hands on her hips, barking orders like a veteran construction foreman. She yelled at one carpenter that his crossbeam was 3 inches off center and told another that his support pillar was half a foot in the wrong position and would compromise the structural integrity. She knew exactly what she was talking about, and those grown men twice her size were following her directions without argument. On the opposite side of the courtyard, the scene could not have been more different. Fifth sister-in-law Guminger had set up a little table with tea and delicate pastries. She was wearing a soft pink dress with a simple cloth apron tied at her waist, which somehow made her curves even more noticeable. She was gently handing a cup of tea to a sweating craftsman, her voice so sweet and tender that the weathered old man turned bright red and stammered his thanks like a shy teenager. Fire and ice. Chaos and calm. Same face, opposite universes. Gulinger spotted me first. Her eyes lit up like someone had plugged her into an electrical outlet. She leaped off her rock, sprinted over, and shoved a crumpled blueprint in my face before I could even say hello. She had redesigned the entire courtyard. The underground cellar was now 3 times deeper, with reinforced stone walls and a new shock absorption system she had invented. She guaranteed that even if her Buddha's Wrath Fire Lotus detonated inside, the building would not move an inch. My eye twitched. She was still thinking about that thing. I told her this was not a house renovation. It was a weapons bunker. She tilted her head innocently and asked what a weapons bunker was, adding that it sounded really cool. A shy little voice called out from behind. Guminger had noticed me too, and her face went instantly crimson. She scurried over with tiny steps, curtsied politely, and then tugged on her sister's sleeve, whispering that she should stop showing me explosive designs the day after blowing up their home. Gulinger puffed out her chest and declared it was not causing trouble. It was the relentless pursuit of technical excellence. Minger ignored her completely. She pulled out a plate of fresh green bean cakes from a little bamboo basket and held them out to me with trembling hands. Her voice was so quiet and nervous I had to lean in to hear her say she had made them herself and hoped I would try one. I smiled and took the plate, deliberately brushing my fingertips across the back of her warm hand as I did. Her system intimacy ticked up 2 points. She flinched like she had been shocked, yanked her hand back, and turned so red I thought she might actually catch fire. But the tiniest smile crept onto her lips, and 2 small dimples appeared on her cheeks. The cake was delicious, light, sweet, perfectly smooth. I told her so, and she nearly melted into the ground from happiness. Gulinger had zero patience for this romantic scene. She snatched the plate out of my hands and shoved it back at her sister, then slapped an even more complicated blueprint against my face. She launched into a breathless explanation of her 10,000 Buddhas ascending concept, a device that could rapid-fire over 100 mini Thunderfire bombs in a single burst. She wanted to load exactly 108 of them. I cut her off before she reached the part where she probably designed an orbital cannon. My scalp was tingling. This girl needed boundaries, but she also needed resources. I asked her where she got her gunpowder ingredients. Her eyes blazed even brighter. She made everything herself, she said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. I pressed further. Where did she find the raw materials? Saltpeter and sulfur were strictly government-controlled. Regular people could not get anywhere near them. She leaned in close and whispered like she was sharing a state secret. There was a place called West Wind Pass outside the city's western gate, a black market where anything could be bought if you had money. Barbarian curved swords, dried yak meat from beyond the border, mysterious pills that supposedly made men stronger, and most importantly for her, saltpeter and sulfur. My ears perked up immediately. A black market. That could be extremely useful. I casually asked if the materials were easy to buy there. Her face crumpled into a frustrated pout. Not easy at all, she complained. And ridiculously expensive. She had spent half her monthly allowance from Su Qingwei on a tiny amount, and yesterday's accident had blown it all up in one glorious second. She looked genuinely heartbroken about the wasted money, not the wasted building. Gulinger was still complaining about the price of materials when something clicked in my brain. Expensive? Hard to find. I suddenly remembered the massive stash of military-grade gunpowder I had taken from Chinchong's carts and stored in my system space. At the time, I thought it was just dangerous contraband. But hearing her talk about how rare and costly those ingredients were, my first instinct was to sell it all for an insane profit. Then I killed that idea immediately. Too small. I was not some street dealer anymore. I held the salt and iron licenses. I had a mountain of gold. Louis was out there building a commercial empire for me right now. Selling raw gunpowder for quick cash was thinking like a peddler when I needed to think like a king. My eyes drifted back to Gulinger, who was still chattering away about her materials being too expensive. And a much bigger idea started forming. Forget selling the powder. What if I gave it all to this girl instead? What if every wild design she had been rambling about could actually be built? The Thunderfire bombs, the flying fire meteors, the city gate-destroying weapons. If even half her concepts worked in practice, I would not just have money and influence. I would have absolute military power, the kind that flips the entire table over. My heart was pounding. This was not just a quirky sister-in-law with a dangerous hobby. She was a walking national treasure, a strategic weapons developer who could design, build, and improve her own creations. She was my personal weapons factory, and she did not even realize it. Then reality punched me in the face. I lunged forward and slapped my hand over her mouth. She had been loudly describing explosive compositions and detonation techniques in the middle of an open courtyard full of construction workers. Any one of them could have been listening. My eyes swept the yard quickly. Nobody seemed to have noticed, but cold sweat was already running down my back. I leaned close to her ear and whispered, asking if she had any idea what the punishment was for privately manufacturing these things. She blinked at me with those giant innocent eyes, nodded casually, and said yes, she knew. Execution of all 9 generations of her family. She said it the way someone might mention the weather. My temple started throbbing. She knew it was a death sentence for everyone around her, and she had been shouting about it like she was explaining a cooking recipe. I pointed at the still smoldering ruins of her courtyard and asked if she called that being discreet. She scratched her head with an embarrassed grin and called it a minor accident. I could not reason with this girl. Normal logic did not apply to whatever was happening inside her skull. So I put on my most serious face and told her in a tone that left zero room for argument. No more experiments at home. Period. The reaction was instant and devastating. Her bright, excited face collapsed like a building with its foundations pulled out. Her mouth turned downward, her eyes filled with tears at terrifying speed, and she stared at me like a puppy that had just been told it could never play again. These experiments were her entire world, the only thing she truly loved. After being exiled with the Lin family, she had lost everything. Only after we settled into the manor and things improved did she finally get to return to her passion. Every day, her happiest hours were spent locked in that workshop with her chemicals and metal parts. And now I was taking it away from her. The guilt hit me like a truck. I felt like I had just stepped on a kitten. I cleared my throat and quickly corrected myself. I told her I was not banning her research. I explained that doing it at home was too dangerous for everyone else. Instead, I would have Louis find her a secret location outside the manor. Somewhere big, somewhere isolated, with all the materials she could ever want. She could research, design, and blow things up to her heart's content without any restrictions. She froze. Those tear-filled eyes blinked once, twice, processing what I had just said. Then she exploded. Not chemically this time, but emotionally. She let out a scream so loud I was genuinely worried it would knock down the freshly rebuilt walls. She launched herself at me like a cannonball, wrapping both arms around my neck in a crushing bear hug that almost knocked me off my feet. She screamed that I was the greatest person alive, her spiritual parent, her long-lost brother from another family. Her words were barely coherent through the sheer volume of her excitement. And then I felt it. Too extremely soft, extremely substantial, and extremely impossible to ignore pressure points slamming into my chest with the full force of her enthusiastic embrace. Whatever her compact frame lacked in height, it more than compensated for in other dimensions. The impact was suffocating in the most literal sense. A strange scent filled my nose, half girlish sweetness, half gunpowder residue. My brain blue-screened for a solid 3 seconds. My system was going haywire. Intimacy notifications were firing like machine gun rounds. But I could not process any of them because I was too busy trying to remember how breathing worked. I croaked at her to calm down and let go, but she was in pure euphoria and could not hear anything. She wrapped her legs around my waist and clung to me like an octopus, squeezing tighter, yelling that she loved me. Then my peripheral vision caught something that made my blood run cold. Gu Minjer was standing a few steps away, holding the unfinished plate of green bean cakes. Her little face was glowing red like heated metal. She was biting her lower lip hard, watching her twin sister wrapped around me like a koala, and those big watery eyes held a cocktail of shock, embarrassment, and something I could not quite define but definitely noticed. I ripped Gulinger off me with every ounce of strength I had and told her to watch her behavior. She landed on her feet, totally unbothered, and grinned at me with all her teeth showing. She said there was nothing to worry about because we were all going to be family anyway. Before I could respond, she spun around and sprinted back inside, already mumbling about her Buddha's Wrathfire Lotus and the 10,000 Buddhas project, creative inspiration apparently striking at maximum force. I stood there catching my breath, trying to look composed and respectable. Minjer was still frozen in place, red as a sunset, refusing to look anywhere near my direction. The silence was extremely uncomfortable. The courtyard was completely silent. Gu Minjer and I stood there staring at each other, neither of us knowing what to do. She was clutching her plate of green bean cakes like a shield, face burning red, looking everywhere except at me. A breeze rolled some dead leaves past our feet. The awkwardness was thick enough to chew on. I was about to say something to break the tension when a system notification chimed in my head. Gulinger's portrait had been collected into my beauty gallery. Already. From one hug. I could not believe it. That promise about giving her a proper workshop with unlimited materials must have hit her right in the heart. For a girl like her, understanding and support for her passion meant more than any romantic gesture ever could. That single moment of recognition had done what months of flirting might not have accomplished. But I could not check the details yet, because poor Minger was still standing there looking like she might faint from embarrassment at any second. I felt genuinely bad. She had watched her twin sister wrap herself around me like a human backpack, and now she was stuck alone with me in the aftermath. I cleared my throat and walked toward her, casually asking for another piece of her delicious green bean cake. She flinched, lowered her head until it nearly disappeared into her impressive neckline, and squeaked out the tiniest agreement. Her trembling hand extended the plate toward me. When I reached for the cake, my fingers brushed against the back of her hand again, completely by accident. Mostly. She jerked her hand back so fast the cakes almost went flying. Her face was now the color of a ripe tomato, and her huge eyes were spinning with panic. I sighed internally. I really was terrible. This poor girl was going to have a heart attack if I kept this up. But her skin really was impossibly soft. Before things got any worse, I made an excuse about needing to check on her sister before the newly rebuilt courtyard got blown up again. Then I escaped. If I stayed any longer, I might do something regrettable to this defenseless little creature who was far too easy to tease. As I walked away, I could feel her gaze on my back. She was probably touching her burning cheeks and staring at the spot where my fingers had grazed her hand. Her heartbeat was probably loud enough to hear from across the yard. Once I found a quiet corner away from everyone, I dove into my system immediately. I pulled up Gulinger's freshly unlocked portrait. The image was spectacular and absolutely insane. A girl in black clothes with a messy bun was standing with her hands on her hips, grinning ear to ear, ash smudges all over her cute face. Behind her, massive flames roared toward the sky, and a perfect mushroom cloud was rising in the background. Of course, what other background would the system give a girl who built bombs as a hobby? Her stats read, Beauty score 96 out of 100, titled, Explosive Sweetheart, Intimacy was. At 62, labeled, Bear Hug Warning. Her special talent was called, Divine Craftsmanship, and the effect upon activation would grant me, God's hands, supernatural coordination and extreme speed in my hands. My mind raced through the possibilities. With that kind of hand control, assembling weapons or throwing projectiles in combat would become terrifyingly fast and precise. And for more personal applications like giving my wives massages or performing any activity requiring dexterity and technique, the potential was equally exciting. Then I read the activation condition and my brain short-circuited. I had to get both Gulinger and Guminger to wear Catgirl costumes and give me a full body spa treatment together. I read it 3 times to make sure I was not hallucinating. Twin sisters, cat ears, matching outfits, full body massage. The system had officially lost its mind, and I had never loved it more. I immediately started analyzing the challenge. Gulinger would probably think a cat costume was hilarious. She might even add modifications to it, like strapping a small explosive to the tail for fun. Getting her into the outfit would not be the hard part. But Guminger, the girl who nearly passed out because our fingers touched, asking her to wear a revealing Catgirl outfit and put her hands all over my body, she would spontaneously combust from sheer embarrassment. She would physically ascend to another dimension powered entirely by shame. This was beyond hell difficulty. This was asking me to convince a baby deer to perform surgery. Still, I pictured it. One chaotic cat girl bouncing around with explosive energy. One shy cat girl blushing so hard she could not look up, her soft hands barely touching me before pulling away in panic. The contrast alone would be enough to end any man. I made my decision on the spot. Whatever it took, however long it required, I was completing this mission. For the God's hands ability. For tactical superiority. For the happiness of my wives. Those were my official reasons, and I was sticking with them. I was still lost in this beautiful fantasy when Gulinger's voice shattered everything. She came tearing out of her workshop like a miniature hurricane, waving an even more elaborate blueprint than before. She was practically vibrating with creative energy as she shoved the paper in my face. She announced that inspiration had struck and she had upgraded her 10,000 Buddhas design. 108 Thunderfire bombs was too few, she declared with the confidence of someone ordering lunch. She had increased it to 360, matching the number of heavenly degrees. She had also redesigned the structure to allow multi-stage transformation. She pointed at a horrifyingly complex cannon tower covered in tiny tubes and mechanical parts. She had named it the Six Roots Purification Cannon. The meaning, she explained with absolute sincerity, was that one shot would purify everything in its path, whether human or ghost, cleansing all six spiritual roots simultaneously. She asked if I could feel the Zen philosophy behind the name. I stared at the blueprint, my temple throbbing violently. This weapon was not designed for battlefield use. This was designed for deleting entire postal codes from existence. The Zen philosophy she was describing was the kind that ended with mass funerals. She tilted her head and asked why I was not speaking. Was it because her design was so amazing that I had been rendered speechless with awe? Before I could formulate a response that would not encourage further escalation, I noticed a small head peeking around the doorframe. Gu Minjer was watching us from behind the door, her cheeks still pink, her enormous eyes round and cautious. I looked down at the doomsday weapon blueprint in my hands, then at the shy little pudding girl hiding behind the door, then back at the grinning mad scientist standing in front of me. One sister built weapons of mass destruction. The other baked pastries and could barely survive a conversation. And somehow I needed to get both of them into matching cat costumes and convince them to give me a massage. I let out the longest sigh of my entire life, in both this world and my previous one. This family was getting more interesting every single day. Unlocking Gu Linger's panel put me in the best mood I had felt in days. I immediately decided to bring both sisters along to see Lu Yi about getting the workshop funding and location sorted out. No point in wasting time when inspiration was burning hot. The manor carriage was spacious enough for 3 people, but no amount of space could contain Gu Linger's boundless energy. The moment she climbed inside, she was bouncing around like a firecracker with legs, waving her 6 Roots Purification Cannon blueprint in my face and delivering a non-stop technical lecture at maximum volume. She explained how she planned to use mortise and tenon joint principles for the transmission system, combined with 8 miniature axles to ensure smooth rotation. Then she started going on about carving spiral grooves inside the cannon barrels using some ancient engineering method to double the speed and force of each projectile. Her eyes were shining with the kind of passion most people reserve for falling in love. Except her love was for things that go boom. Meanwhile, in the opposite corner of the carriage, the contrast could not have been more extreme. Gu Minjer had folded herself into the smallest possible shape, practically trying to become invisible. Her head was bowed so low her chin nearly touched her chest, and her little fingers were nervously twisting the hem of her dress. She was radiating pure anxiety about being trapped in a small enclosed space with me. Then the carriage hit a rough patch of road. The whole vehicle lurched violently without warning, and Minjer lost her balance completely. She let out a tiny yelp and tumbled straight into my arms before either of us could react. Her soft, sweet-smelling body pressed against mine, and I could hear my own heartbeat getting faster against my will. She was mortified, stammering apologies and trying desperately to pull away. But the road kept bouncing us around, and the harder she struggled, the more tangled up we got. My system went absolutely wild, firing off intimacy notifications like a machine gun. Then it got worse. Or better, depending on your perspective. Gu Linger, completely oblivious to the charged atmosphere, leaned over to help her sister up. The carriage jolted again at exactly the wrong moment, and she crashed into my other side with a surprised shriek. Suddenly, I had both twins pressed against me, one on each side. The explosive sweetheart on my left, the shy pudding on my right. Gu Linger looked up at me with those bright, clueless eyes and asked why my face was so red. Was it because her improved cannon design was so impressive that I could not contain my excitement? I wanted to laugh and cry at the same time. Excited did not even begin to cover what I was feeling. I was about to spontaneously combust, and it had nothing to do with artillery. The carriage finally stopped in front of the biggest commercial building on the busiest street in North City. This used to be Chun Wanjin's flagship business, the Four Seas Trading Company. The old sign had already been taken down, and Lu Yi was having a new one made. By this afternoon, it would read, Lin Family Trading Company, in bold characters. I practically fell out of the carriage gulping fresh air, trying to calm down after that ride. Gu Linger charged inside first like a small cannonball. Minjer followed behind me with tiny steps, face still pink, quiet as a shadow. Inside, the place was absolute chaos, but the organized kind. It was busier than the most crowded marketplace I had ever seen. Accountants and clerks were sprinting in every direction, carrying stacks of ledgers and inventory lists, shouting numbers at each other. The fall of the Chen family had not changed the daily operations. It just meant everyone had a new boss, and mountains of accounts needed to be recalculated and transferred from scratch. Every single person was working at full tilt. At the center of it all sat Lu Yi, nearly buried behind a wall of account books piled higher than her head. She looked completely different today. Gone was the heavy black coat and the face covering hat she used to wear outside. Instead, she was wearing a fitted pale blue dress that traced every curve of her body with devastating precision. Her tiny waist and generous figure were on full display for the first time in public. She had made a decision. Her beauty and her talent were both gifts she was born with. There was no reason to hide either one anymore. Before, she covered herself because she was afraid people would only see her appearance and dismiss her mind. But now she had me. She did not need to prove herself to anyone else ever again. Her brilliance would shine for one person only. And that person happened to be a very lucky idiot sitting in a carriage with twin sisters falling into his lap. She was frowning in concentration, her brush flying across the pages as she processed accounts at inhuman speed. Nearby, Rushua sat in her red outfit with her sword across her lap, silently standing guard. Lu Yi was new to this territory and these people, so Rushua had come along as her personal bodyguard. No one was going to cause trouble with the woman who had annihilated 300 gang members standing watch. Gu Linger announced our arrival before she even entered the room, her voice echoing through the building like a trumpet. Lu Yi looked up from her ocean of paperwork, and her stressed expression melted into a genuine warm smile the instant she saw us. Rushua's perpetually icy face also softened noticeably when she spotted the twins. Gu Linger immediately commandeered Lu Yi's teapot and started drinking straight from the spout like a wild animal. Lu Yi just laughed, shook her head, and pinched her cheek affectionately, telling her to slow down. Then she called Minjer over with a gentle wave. The shy girl curtsied politely to both older sisters and was immediately pulled into a warm hug by Lu Yi. Rushua reached over and tenderly brushed a stray hair from Minjer's forehead. Surrounded by this sisterly affection, Minjer's timid eyes sparkled with quiet happiness. Watching the four of them together filled my chest with warmth. This was family, real family.